I never expected a few rusted out RV parks on the back roads of America to change the way I look at people or the way I sleep at night. It started like a challenge, really, a sort of personal dare. I had a month off, an aging 2004 Winnebago with just enough charm to pretend it was reliable, and a growing obsession with strange stories I'd seen online. Photos of abandoned campgrounds, cracked pavement overgrown with weeds, RVs still parked with windows blacked out, like someone was still inside. Places nobody wanted to talk about. I figured I'd visit a few, get some video, maybe share it on a travel blog I half-heartedly kept up. But there was something deeper in me, something I didn't want to admit. I wanted to feel something again. I was recently divorced. No kids, no ties, just silence stretching out in all directions and the same quiet nagging thought in the back of my head. You disappeared and nobody noticed. So I started mapping them out. Old RV parks that didn't exist on Google anymore. Ones where no one picked up the phone, or where the most recent reviews ended around 2011 with vague warnings like, "Don't stay here, something's off." That was all I needed. Curiosity, solitude, and a kind of reckless indifference to my own well-being. That's what got me started. The first stop was a place outside of Red Bluff, California, a scorched, forgotten stretch off Highway 36 where the desert starts whispering to itself. The place was called Whispering Pines RV Haven. The name was almost funny. There were no pines, and what whispered wasn't the wind. I pulled in late afternoon. The air was hot, dry, still. Dust clung to everything like static. There was no gate, just a bent sign half buried in dirt and shot through with holes. The loop road was cracked, gravel clawing its way through old asphalt. I saw maybe 10 RV pads, empty now, except for one half-burned trailer leaning at an angle. Something had melted through the side of it, like fire had poured out of the window and licked its way into the ground. I parked at the far end, half expecting some ghostly caretaker to wander out with a shotgun or a clipboard. But no one came. Just me and the desert silence. The thing was, it didn't feel abandoned. Not completely. There were tire tracks in the gravel, fresh ones, not mine. I got out and walked around, boots crunching in a way that seemed too loud. You ever notice how empty places almost amplify sound, like the silence is pushing back? I kept walking past the burned trailer, glancing at the shattered windows. The inside was blackened, gutted, but I swear I smelled something sweet, not like rot, not exactly. More like something had been cooking. That smell you get when sugar burns on a stovetop. And it was recent. I looked for footprints, signs of squatters maybe, but the dirt around the pads was untouched, bone dry. No wind, no wildlife sounds, just the hot pressure of the sun and that strange sweetness lingering in the air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I parked the RV near the center of the old loop and drew the blinds, telling myself I was being paranoid. But my gut wouldn't calm down. I kept thinking about those tire tracks, fresh, looping in but not looping out. Whoever had driven in hadn't left. And it wasn't me. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not gravel crunching, not wind rattling the aluminum. I mean, boots on pavement, slow, deliberate. I sat up and froze, my breath caught in my throat, like it belonged to someone else. The steps circled the RV once. Then again, they stopped at the passenger door. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then they were gone. No knock, no light, nothing. When I finally cracked the blinds, all I saw was the dark outline of the burned-out trailer in the moonlight. But I could feel it, that someone had been there, or maybe still was, hiding behind that blackened shell of melted aluminum and carbonized plastic. I left before dawn, didn't bother with coffee, just turned the key and drove until the sky turned orange and I started seeing real road signs again. I told myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe someone else had camped out nearby. Maybe I didn't really smell anything at all. But that wasn't the last one. There was a place near Lake Texoma, just on the Oklahoma side, called Summer's Edge Family RV Park. That name was a cruel joke, too. No families, no edge of summer, just rotted out playground equipment and the kind of silence that made your skin itch. I found it by accident, didn't even have it on my map. The road just dipped off Route 377, and the trees bent over it in a way that made me slow down. You know that feeling when something draws you in, like your hands are on the wheel, but someone else is making the decision? The entrance was overgrown, but I spotted the sign through the trees, a rusted arch with letters missing. Smirs Gi, like the bones of something that once mattered. I turned in before I could change my mind. This one was different. Not as dry. The air here was humid, thick, like it didn't want to be breathed. There were cabins near the back, or what used to be cabins. Collapsed roofs, shattered doors. RV pads scattered in a lazy, almost random layout, like someone had lost the blueprints halfway through construction. I parked near the old recreation hall. Its door had been nailed shut, but one of the windows was cracked open just enough to see inside. Folded chairs, a rusted podium, and something scrawled on the wall in red chalk, or maybe paint. They never left. I turned around and walked straight back to the RV. I didn't feel alone in that place. I felt watched. Not just by one thing, but by many. The heat got to me that night. The humidity made the walls sweat. I left the door open for a while just to try to breathe, but the air outside was worse, heavier. It smelled like water that had been sitting too long, like mildew and wet ashes. I tried to sleep. I tried music. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Not footsteps this time. Not whispering. This time, it was laughter. Children. But not the kind of laughter you want to hear. Not joyful. Not even mischievous. This was broken laughter, like someone trying to remember what it sounded like and failing. I opened the window and yelled out, "Hey, who's there?" Nothing. Then, from inside one of the cabins, I saw movement, a flicker of light, a shadow. But it wasn't tall. It was small, child-sized. I backed away from the window and locked the RV door. That same sugar-burnt smell drifted in again, faint but unmistakable. That was when I started to realize something. It wasn't the parks that were abandoned, it was the people. The ones who used to live there, they hadn't left. Not really. Some had burned, some had drowned, some had gone mad. But pieces of them remained, like echoes soaked into the ground. Places like this didn't just vanish, they consumed. They waited. And I wasn't just visiting. I was feeding them. I left Summer's Edge with my hands still trembling on the wheel. Didn't even brush my teeth, just slammed the RV into drive and floored it back through the woods until the overgrowth scraped down both sides of the Winnebago like claws. I didn't look back at the cabins. I didn't want to see if anything followed. I kept driving east for days. Didn't stop unless I had to. No music, no GPS reroutes, just silence and whatever gas stations I could find between stretches of empty road. I figured maybe if I put enough miles between me and those parks, I could pretend it never happened. But it didn't work like that. You see, once you start seeing these places, I mean really seeing them, not as old, forgotten campgrounds, but as something alive and waiting, you stop being able to unsee. They're everywhere, hidden between truck stops and cattle fences, folded into the seams of towns that don't even show up on state maps. You just need to know how to feel for them, and once you do, they start finding you. I'd planned to stop in Arkansas, rest a bit near the Ouachita Mountains, maybe reset. But something else pulled me south. There was a park I'd read about once in a trucker's forum, not on Reddit, not in the tourist spaces. This was a deep thread, almost a decade old, titled simply, "Do not stay at Big Briar RV Park." No pictures, just 2 posts. One said, "Briarwood, near Prescott. It ain't closed, it's waiting." The second one just said, "Check the bathrooms before sundown. If the door is locked from the inside, don't wait around." That was it. That was enough. I don't know what part of me needed to go. Maybe I thought I was invincible. Maybe I wanted to push the edge. Or maybe, deep down, I was hoping for something to finally explain all of this. Something to make it feel like more than madness and mildew and the sound of unseen footsteps circling my bed. Big Briar sat at the end of a dead road. Literally. The gravel just stopped, like the county gave up halfway through paving it. Oaks and maples leaned over both sides of the one-lane stretch, their branches tangled above like a canopy that blocked out the sun. I had to slow the RV to a crawl to keep from scraping them. The deeper I went, the darker it got. Midday looked like dusk. Then, like the woods just stepped back, the road opened. A clearing, flattened grass, old electrical hookups half buried in vines, and a rust-colored sign that had once been painted white, Big Briar Family Park. I pulled in slow. I was done pretending I wasn't scared. The place had an awful stillness to it. Not just quiet, but suppressed, like the whole clearing was holding its breath, waiting to exhale once I stepped out of the cab. I parked beneath what had once been the bathhouse awning. The building was a squat brick rectangle stained green with algae, one side caved in where a tree had fallen long ago. Still, I could make out the faded restroom signs. I don't know why, but I went for the men's side first. The door was closed. When I tried the handle, it didn't budge. Locked. I stepped back, breath slowing, that sick dread rising again from somewhere below my ribs. There was no electricity here, no running water. The RV pads had weeds growing through the concrete, but the door was locked from the inside. I circled the building slowly. The women's room door stood wide open, yawning into darkness. Inside, the smell hit first. Rot and mold, wet wood and time. But there was something else layered beneath it. Something sharper, something metallic. I turned on my flashlight and stepped inside. The light cut through the gloom, landing on broken tiles, cracked mirrors, a line of sinks coated in green and brown. A stall door creaked slowly as I passed, moved by nothing I could see, and then the smell grew stronger. The last stall at the end was closed. The lock had been wedged with something, a toothbrush. Its handle snapped and jammed into the latch from the inside. I called out, "Anyone in there?" Silence. I knocked once. No answer. I pushed, and the door gave with a jolt. Inside, a child-sized sleeping bag lay unzipped across the toilet. Old, stained, stuffed animals sat in the corner, their faces faded, one missing an eye, and on the wall, scratched deep into the tile with something sharp, were the words, "Mom said stay inside." I backed out of that room fast, not running, but shaking. I sat back in the RV with the engine off, hands gripping the wheel like I could squeeze the fear out through my fingertips. I didn't know what I was doing there anymore. This wasn't travel. This wasn't curiosity. I felt like I was trespassing into places where grief had congealed. These weren't just parks. They were graves. And the people buried there weren't at rest. That night, I tried to sleep with every light on, but sleep didn't come. Instead, I started hearing the lock jiggle. It started just after 1 a.m., not loud, just the subtle rattle of a bathroom deadbolt turning back and forth, like someone was trying it, over and over again, without enough strength to push it open. I closed the blinds, even though I couldn't see anything outside. Then came the knock. Not on the RV door, on the side of the Winnebago, down low, like the knuckles of a child. 3 times, then silence. I sat there sweating, hand hovering over the ignition key, but I didn't move. Something in me wanted to know what would happen if I waited, if I didn't run. And I heard the whisper, right next to my ear, inside the RV. It said, "I waited too." I turned. Nothing there. No one behind me. Nothing outside the window. Just the pitch-black void of Big Briar pressing in on all sides. That broke me. I floored the gas, didn't care if I ran over roots or wrecked the tires. I drove until sunrise. I pulled off somewhere near Texarkana and slept in a Walmart parking lot, surrounded by the safe hum of civilization. Other rigs, lights, the smell of diesel and coffee and food. Things that made sense. Things that were alive. And I realized something I hadn't before. These parks, they're not forgotten. They're fed by us. By people like me who wander in, thinking we're invincible, thinking our stories can't be swallowed like theirs were. But these places, Whispering Pines, Summer's Edge, Big Briar, they don't just vanish from the maps, they erase, one story at a time. I should have gone home after Big Briar. I knew it, even then. Knew I had pushed past some invisible line, that invisible line people never talk about, but every traveler feels. It's not on any map, not marked by a sign. It's just a knowing, a pressure in your chest, a whisper in your spine that says, this far, but no further. But I didn't go home because I had nowhere I wanted to return to. The house was empty, the kind of sterile quiet you can scrub a kitchen floor to but never clean out of your soul. My marriage ended long before the divorce papers were signed, and when the final box was taped and gone, all I had left were the open roads and the buzz of white noise in my head that only silence could match. So I kept driving, through Louisiana, then Mississippi, nights spent in real parks, commercial places with concrete pads and loud families and dogs on leashes. You'd think I'd be grateful for the noise. But that's the thing, after a while, even joy feels like static. Nothing could drown out the echoes I carried with me. The more I tried to avoid the darkness, the more it seemed to find me anyway. It happened again off the Natchez Trace. You get down in the swampy veins of southern Mississippi, where the humidity makes the air thick enough to chew and the trees lean toward the road like they're trying to remember what people smell like. There was a park just west of Port Gibson called Hollow Creek, or at least that's what the mildewed sign said, half covered in moss and bullet holes. A real old place, according to what I could dig up. Opened in 1964, closed in '89 after a flood reportedly wiped out half the property and a bridge leading in, but someone had reopened it. I saw new tire ruts, a hanging power line rigged up with modern cabling, like someone had come out and spliced into the grid again. And I don't know why, but something about that made it worse, as if the past itself had reached up and tapped a line straight into the present, still drawing power, still feeding. I should have turned around, but I didn't. I pulled in just before dusk, parked under a weeping willow that looked more like it belonged in a haunted plantation story than an RV park. There were picnic tables swallowed by vines, a rusted swing set with chains that hung limp and wet in the air, not swaying even as the breeze picked up. I was tired, not just travel tired, soul tired. The kind of fatigue that makes you stop asking, why am I doing this, and start asking, what difference would it make if I stopped? I made tea. Sat on the small pull-out step just outside the RV. The sun was low and gold behind the tree line. Fireflies floated lazily over puddles that hadn't dried in weeks. And for a moment, just a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this place was different. Then I saw the reflection. Not mine, not a person, but movement. In the glass door of the RV, just behind me, as if someone had walked past and turned to look through the reflection from inside. I spun around. Nothing. No one. Just the swing set. And now the chains were moving. Just a little. Back and forth. Like someone had pushed it once hard, then walked away. The air grew colder, heavier. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like the humidity folded in on itself and the pressure dropped. My ears popped. I could hear my heartbeat in my skull. I stepped inside the RV, locked the door, and told myself I was tired. Imagining things. Seeing shadows. But the moment I sat down on the bed, I heard it. Running water. From the bathroom. That shouldn't have been possible. I'd turned the pump off. I was disconnected from hookups. No way any faucet should be dripping. But it wasn't dripping. It was running, like someone had turned it on full blast. I stood in the doorway and stared. The sink was empty, bone dry. But I could still hear the water. It was coming from the shower, behind the curtain. And here's the part I still can't explain. I could see the bottom of the shower. No water, no pooling, just dry linoleum. But I heard it. And when I reached out, hand trembling, curtain hooked with one finger, the temperature of the air dropped so fast I could see my breath. I pulled the curtain back. Nothing. But on the mirror above the sink, something was written, fogged over like condensation had formed only there. One word, stay. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat back on the edge of the bed, hands clenched around my knees, and whispered to myself, it's just the road. You're tired. That's all. It's just the road. But deep down, I knew. These weren't hallucinations, not shared trauma, not the lingering taste of grief or stress or regret. These places, these abandoned parks with their locked bathrooms, their melted trailers, their child-sized echoes, they were feeding on something real. Memory. Maybe. Loneliness. Or maybe just the blind, stubborn ache in people like me who keep driving deeper into the forgotten corners of the country, thinking we're immune, thinking we're different. That night, I slept in my boots, one hand resting on the ignition key, the other wrapped around a flashlight I never turned off. And sometime around 3 a.m., the air shifted again. I smelled oranges, fresh, sweet, citrus. The kind of smell that doesn't belong in the swamp. The kind of smell that wakes up something primal in your brain, something ancient that says this isn't right. Then the laughter came. Not a child this time, not joyless, but layered. It sounded like a woman's voice, but wrong, stretched, warped, like someone had pressed fast forward and rewind at the same time, and her laugh was caught in the gears. Then silence. Then a knock on the roof. Soft, measured, right above my bed, like knuckles wrapped in cloth. One knock. 2. 3. I didn't look. I didn't move. And I didn't sleep again until daylight filtered through the blinds like lifeblood pouring in from another dimension. By morning, the fog had thickened outside. The trees looked closer than before. I could no longer see the road I came in on. But I started the engine anyway and drove blind, trusting only the direction of the rising sun to guide me. When I finally saw pavement again, it felt like re-entering the world. But I knew I hadn't escaped anything. These parks don't want your body. They want your presence, your attention, your fear. And once you've given them even a drop of that, they're never quite done with you. After Hollow Creek, I swore I'd stop. I even said it out loud, like some kind of promise. Pulled off at a rest area near Montgomery, Alabama, and told myself, no more old parks, no more off-the-map detours. You got your thrill. You got your stories. Time to go home, or whatever's left of home. But here's the thing about hauntings. They don't always live in places. Sometimes they follow you. They change shape, shift into quiet things. They sit in the back of your mind and wait. And when they think you've gotten soft, they press in again, just to see how much of you is left. So when I found the notebook wedged under the passenger seat, I knew I hadn't escaped. I hadn't seen it before. And it wasn't mine. It was leather-bound, cracked at the spine, with warped pages and faint water damage. No title. Just initials carved into the back cover. Char M. I opened it. The first page simply read, "Leave it alone. If you found this, it's already too late." What followed was a list of names, dates, and strange, frantic entries. Sketches of places that felt eerily familiar. Wooded lots, rusted signage, notes about padlocks and footsteps and dreams that bled into waking. The last entry had no date, just a scrawled message. Devil's Elbow, last one. If I don't come back, burn the book. That name rattled something loose in my brain. I'd heard it once, years ago, when I first started RV camping. An old-timer at a roadside diner in Missouri told me never to camp near the river east of Dixon. He didn't call it a park, though. He just pointed a finger and said, "That place was left behind for a reason. Devil's Elbow takes what it wants." I didn't know why, but I felt pulled. I told myself it was closure, that if I just went to this final place, just looked, I could put it behind me, like staring down the last demon before you lock the door forever. So I headed north into Missouri's backwoods. It wasn't on any map, of course, not by name, but I followed the descriptions from the notebook. County roads that twisted like scars through the Ozarks, a rusted rail bridge half collapsed over the Gasconade River, and finally a hand-painted sign with the words barely legible, Devil's Elbow, RV and Cabin Retreat. It wasn't just abandoned. It was consumed. The trees had folded in over the main drive, their trunks twisted at strange angles, like they'd been bent toward the ground in silent prayer or warning. The gravel road had sunk in places, forming shallow puddles that didn't ripple even when I drove through them. The air smelled like wet iron and sulfur, like the earth had been bleeding and no one noticed. I parked on what remained of the old loop road, just outside a collapsed office building. The door was gone. Inside, there was nothing but shredded carpet, overturned file cabinets, and that looked like it had been carved into the floor with a blade. Not a symbol. A map. Crude, childlike, showing 6 cabins and something marked only with an X at the center. I don't know what came over me, but I followed it. Cabin 1 was nothing but splinters. Cabin 2 still stood, but the door had been nailed shut from the outside. Cabins 3 and 4 were gone, swallowed by kudzu, roof beams poking out like ribs. Cabin 5, Cabin 5 was open, and the moment I stepped in, everything felt wrong. The air was thick, hot, as if someone had just left. The floorboards groaned under my weight in slow, deliberate moans. Dust floated in the air, but only in the corners. The center was clean, too clean. There was a mattress, a Bible, a lantern, and a tape recorder. I stared at it for a long time before pressing play. The voice was a man's, raw, hoarse, like he'd been screaming for hours before hitting record. "This is Robert Myers. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. This place isn't a campground. It's a trap. It remembers. It feeds. Don't follow the trail. Don't go to the fire pit. That's where it started. That's where it calls you back. And if you see the red light, run. Don't look. Just run." Then static. I stood there, frozen. And then I saw it. From the broken window, across the clearing, something glowed behind the tree line. A red light. Faint, pulsing, beckoning. My legs moved before I could think. I left the cabin, flashlight forgotten. The trees swallowed the light in seconds, and I followed it like a fool, deeper and deeper into the woods. The trail curved sharply left, and the ground dipped into a basin, a natural pit filled with ash and blackened stones, the remains of a fire pit. Charred logs in a circle, burn marks running outward like the flame had exploded from the center. And there, sitting in the ash, was a photograph. Black and white, edges curled with heat. It showed a man in an RV park holding a child's hand. The man looked like me. The child didn't have a face. I staggered back, breath caught in my throat, chest seizing up like the air was being sucked out. Then I heard it, not footsteps, not whispering. Right behind me, long, wet, human, but just wrong. I turned and saw nothing, but the red light was closer now, glowing directly from the center of the fire pit. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms, thorns ripped through my jeans, my lungs burned, my thoughts splintered. I didn't know what direction I was going anymore, only that I had to get away. When I finally broke back into the clearing, the RV looked different, like it had been sitting there much longer, like it had aged, rust where there hadn't been rust, a tire deflated, one headlight cracked. Inside, the clock was blinking 12, and the notebook, gone. Just a damp patch on the seat where it had been. I started the engine. It coughed once, twice, then turned over. I drove out of Devil's Elbow as the trees groaned behind me, their branches twisting overhead like they were trying to seal the road closed again. I haven't stopped since. I don't camp anymore. I sleep in lit parking lots, Walmarts, gas stations with bright halogens and security cameras. I keep the doors locked. I don't stop near tree lines. I don't read forgotten journals. And I don't chase ghost parks anymore. Because I learned something out there, in the black bone of the Ozarks, in the mildew breath of the swamps, in the soot and sulfur that trails behind every unmarked exit. Some places weren't left behind. They were shut in, locked up, not to protect us from what's inside, but to protect what's inside from us. It's been 6 months since Devil's Elbow. I still wake up sometimes not knowing where I am. My mind doesn't register strip mall lighting or the buzz of truck stop diesel engines right away. For those first few seconds after waking, especially when it's just before dawn, when everything's gray and half-formed, I still expect to see trees pressing against the windows, a red light glowing faintly just beyond the glass, the sound of breathing that isn't mine. I keep the RV moving. I don't stop for more than a night. I don't drive at night either. That's when they're stronger. Whatever they are. I've learned to trust the rhythm of the day. It has the clarity sunlight brings, even if it's temporary. But something has changed. The world doesn't feel the same anymore. It's not just the parks, it's the silence that settles behind me after I leave one. Like something isn't finished, like something is waiting. I started noticing small changes. Birdsong in places that should be quiet, insects that stop chirping the moment I step outside, gas pumps that glitch when I pull in, blinking unavailable. even though the station's full. And sometimes, just as I'm drifting off in a parking lot, I hear a voice outside the RV say, "We remember." Always calm, always near the back bumper. But I never see anyone. I try to tell myself it's nothing, just fatigue, memory misfiring, old fears trying to hold on. But I know better. I know what I saw, what I felt. These parks, they're not stories, they're not legends. They're scars in the skin of the country, still bleeding under the surface. And some of them are starting to open again. I started marking them, not online, not with GPS pins. That's how they hide. They slip in the cracks between systems. So I started drawing them. A real map. Paper. Ink. Old school. Just like the one I found carved into that office floor at Devil's Elbow. And now I've got 17 places marked. 17 forgotten RV parks that shouldn't be there, but are. Some I've seen, some I've just felt. They pull at you, not with signs or arrows, but with memories. Regret. Shame. They show up when you're low, when you've lost someone, when you're driving just to keep from thinking. And I'm telling you this, not because I want to scare you, not because I think you'll believe me. I'm telling you because you need to know. Because one day you might be on a trip with your family or out by yourself, chasing solitude, trying to find the edge of something you can't name. And you'll see a hand-painted sign or a weathered archway, or maybe nothing at all, just an empty loop of cracked pavement and a row of forgotten hookups. And you'll think, looks quiet, might be worth a night, and you'll park, and maybe, just maybe, you'll hear footsteps on gravel around 2 a.m., or a knock low on the back panel, or laughter, distant but wrong. That's when you'll remember this voice. That's when I hope you'll listen. Because here's the part I haven't said yet, the part that still keeps me up. I don't think I ever left. Not really. I think Devil's Elbow did something to me. Or maybe it revealed something that was already there. Maybe these parks don't trap people the way we think. Maybe they just wait for people like me to come along. People already hollowed out by loss, by regret, by too much road and not enough reason. I still have that photo from the fire pit. The one that looked like me holding the faceless child's hand. It sits taped above the sink. I don't know why I keep it. I think maybe I'm afraid to throw it away. Like if I do, something final will happen, something that can't be undone. I stared at it last night for a long time and I realized something. That child, that faceless silhouette, it wasn't a stranger. It was me. Not as a kid, but as I am now, adrift, ungrounded, handheld by something I can't name, something that knows me. And that's when it hit me. Maybe these parks aren't about death. Maybe they're about remembrance. Maybe when you drive too far from your life, when you lose all your ties, all your reasons for being, these places, they remember you, even when no one else does. They whisper, stay. They knock, you're not alone. They burn. This is your last stop. And part of you, the tired, broken part, wants to believe it, wants to rest. But if you do, you never come back. You don't get to leave and tell the story. You become the story. Another laughter in the night. Another locked stall door with a toothbrush jammed in the latch. Another reflection in a blackened window seen only by the next traveler passing through. So here I am, moving still. Not because I'm brave, not because I want to finish something, but because I have to. Because if I stop, even for a moment, I don't think I'll ever start again. If you're hearing this, maybe you're like me. Maybe you've seen one of the signs. Maybe you've felt that pull on the back roads, that itch in your brain that tells you there's something waiting just off the main highway, some forgotten slice of the country where the air smells wrong and time folds in on itself. And maybe, just maybe, you've stepped out of your RV and felt eyes on you, even when the place looked empty. If that's you, if you're already feeling it, here's what I need you to remember. You can leave. You must leave. Don't wait for it to knock. Don't wait for the laughter to start. Don't wait to see your own face in a photo that no one ever took. Because these parks, they only look abandoned. But every forgotten picnic table, every rusted swing, every trailer melted and blackened and left like a carcass in the dirt, they're all part of something older, something that doesn't forget. And once it knows your name, it's only a matter of time. So keep moving, keep your lights on. And if you ever find yourself driving past a campground that wasn't on your map, that smells faintly of sugar and ash, where the gate is open but the office is dark, don't stop, don't slow down, don't even look. Just keep driving and remember me, because I remember you. I didn't expect the road to break me. I thought I was stronger than that. I thought I knew what freedom looked like: wide skies, empty highways, silence broken only by the wind through the trees and the low hum of my engine. But I didn't understand what real silence was. I didn't understand what it could do to a man when it lingers too long, when it creeps in through the windows at night and settles into your chest like smoke. It started like all stories do, with good intentions. After the divorce, I sold the house, packed up the remains of a life I no longer recognized, and bought a used Class C RV off a mechanic from Idaho. I figured if I was going to be alone, I might as well be alone on my own terms. No walls, no neighbors, just the road and me. People talk about RV living like it's a postcard, like every morning is a sunrise over red cliffs or a peaceful cup of coffee by a still mountain lake. And yeah, sometimes it is. But no one talks about the nights, the long, cold stretches of nothingness, the way you can be surrounded by wilderness so vast it makes your thoughts echo, or the way your mind can turn on you when the map runs out and the only voice you hear is your own. I was forenamed Tom. I'd been on the road full-time for 5 months when it happened. I was somewhere near the Nevada-Utah border, out past the Bonneville Salt Flats, a kind of nowhere that's not on the way to anything, just endless horizon, brush, and sky. I'd taken a detour off I-80 after seeing a sign for a primitive desert campground on a dusty service road. Free camping, no hookups, just raw land, and I liked the idea of that. Something real, something hard and dry and true. When I pulled in, there were no other rigs in sight, just a loop of gravel etched into the scrubland and a couple of faded picnic tables half buried in dust. No trees, no shade, just the kind of heat that warps your vision and makes every shadow look like it's breathing. I parked near the edge of the loop, facing the distant hills. I told myself I'd only stay a night, just one night to reset. But I ended up staying longer. 3 days, maybe 4. I don't even remember anymore. The days started to blur and the nights got strange. The first one was uneventful, mostly. A little wind, a couple of jackrabbits, the sound of the RV's cooling system clicking as it settled into the dry air. I remember watching the stars through the skylight above my bed and feeling small in a way I liked. There's something holy about being alone under that much sky. But it was the second night when things shifted. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound, light, rhythmic tapping. Not loud, not insistent, just steady, like someone was dragging a stick along the side of the RV. At first, I thought it was wind, maybe a branch, but there were no trees, just open desert. I sat up, heartbeat slow but heavy, and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the rear driver's side, just under the bedroom window. I leaned over and peeked through the blinds, but there was nothing there. Just open dark. I turned on the exterior light, the LED flood I installed myself, and stepped outside with a flashlight and a knife in my back pocket, more for the comfort of it than anything. There were no tracks, no movement, just that strange, thick silence you only get in the desert at night. I walked a slow circle around the rig, scanning every corner, but found nothing. And still, I felt watched. I chalked it up to nerves, maybe a ground squirrel scuttling under the chassis, told myself to go back to sleep. But the silence had changed. It was charged somehow, like the desert itself was holding its breath. The next morning, I told myself to leave. I even started the engine, ran through my departure checklist, but something in me hesitated. It wasn't stubbornness exactly, more like unfinished business. Like I had to stay just a little longer to figure out what I'd almost felt the night before, to prove I wasn't imagining it. That day, the heat was brutal. I stayed mostly inside, reading, journaling, trying to meditate through the restlessness building in my chest. I kept thinking about that tapping sound, the rhythm of it. It wasn't random, it had a pattern. That's what unnerved me most. When night came, I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid in bed with the lights off, listening. I'd turned off the AC to cut down on noise, and the stillness inside was almost unbearable. Every creak of the RV felt amplified. Every distant coyote cry sounded closer than it should have. And then around the same time as before, just after 2, it came again. Tap, tap. Only this time, it moved, slowly, from the rear panel to the side window, from the side window toward the door. I held my breath. I didn't move. My heart was slamming so hard in my chest I thought it would give me away. I reached for the knife on the bedside table, cursing myself for not installing a second camera or motion sensor back there. The sound stopped. Silence again. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. Still nothing. And then the handle to the RV door jiggled. Just once. Just a soft metallic twitch, like someone testing it. I jumped up, slammed the deadbolt into place, and shouted into the dark, "Hey, I'm armed!" My voice cracked. It sounded weaker than I wanted it to. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Come morning, I stepped out into a still, windless heat. The air felt heavier than it had the day before, like something was pressing down on the campground. I walked the perimeter again, looking for prints, marks, signs of anything. And I found something. Just beneath the driver's side window, in the fine layer of dust on the RV's exterior, a handprint, too small to be a man's. Fingers too long for a child's. No shoes nearby. No prints in the dirt. Just that one handprint, like it had been pressed there without weight. Like whoever left it didn't walk up to the RV, they reached. That was when I knew I'd made a mistake. Not just staying an extra night, not just ignoring my gut, but in thinking I could outrun the weight of my own mind. Because what followed, what came next in that wasteland stretch of desert, wasn't just about strange sounds or shadows in the night. It was about how fast your thoughts can betray you, how easily your past can catch up with you, how the silence out here can turn into something else entirely, something that doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to learn you. And once it does, it doesn't let go. I didn't leave that day either. I should have. God knows I should have. But something about that handprint kept me grounded, like an anchor dropped straight into my chest. I didn't want to believe it was real. I wanted to prove it wasn't. Like if I could just reason it out, I'd have control again. That's the thing no one tells you about RV living. It's not just the mechanics or the weather or the route planning that wears you down. It's the slow erosion of certainty. You don't realize how much you rely on other people just to confirm reality. A nod from a stranger, a passing truck, a voice on the radio. Out here, with no one to look you in the eye, you start to question things. Little things at first. Was that noise in your head or real? Did you really see something move at the edge of the brush? Or was it heat distortion? You tell yourself it's the wind. You tell yourself it's animals. You tell yourself the desert plays Trey's tricks. But it doesn't feel like a trick when it keeps happening. That afternoon, I drove 5 miles out from camp to get a weak bar of signal and called my brother. I didn't tell him everything, just said I was camping alone and starting to feel a little off. He laughed, told me I was finally going stir crazy, and said I should come up to Oregon and park on his property for a few weeks. I almost did. I nearly turned the ignition, but I didn't. I said I'd sleep on it. By dusk, the desert had cooled to something close to tolerable. The sky turned copper, then bruised purple. I sat outside with my flashlight and my journal d'affaires, trying to calm the swarm in my head. I wrote things down, timelines, impressions, sounds, ideas. I figured if I could document it, I could dissect it. Make it small. Make it manageable. But the handprint was still there. And around midnight, the air changed again. Have you ever felt a shift in temperature that wasn't weather? Like the kind of cold that feels too sudden, too selective, like it's targeting just you? I felt it then. Inside the RV, the air got heavy, thick, the kind of thick you taste. metallic, almost like rain on aluminum, but there was no storm. I turned off every light, sat in the dark, waited. I don't know what I was waiting for, but something came. It started with the refrigerator, that soft humming sound we all ignore. It just stopped. The whole RV seemed to hold its breath. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Then the back wall creaked, as if something had leaned against it from the outside. The walls flexed, groaned. Then knock, 3 of them, not tapping, knocking, measured, human. I froze, not out of fear exactly, more like confusion, like I couldn't figure out which instinct to trust. Fight, flight, stay dead still and hope it passed? I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Another knock, this time closer. Toward the side door. I rose slowly, reached for the flashlight, but it flickered and died in my hand. I tried the overhead, nothing. Total blackout. The electrical was gone. That's when I smelled it. Wet dust, like when a monsoon hits dried earth. That heavy mineral scent, except it had this sour undercurrent. Not decay exactly, but something unclean, unnatural. Like something that didn't belong in the desert had dragged itself through it and brought the rot with it. I pressed my forehead to the window and tried to see out. There was nothing. No figures. No shapes. Just endless black and the suggestion of movement somewhere at the periphery. The kind that disappears the second you focus. I thought about turning on the engine, about throwing the RV in gear and tearing down that gravel loop until I hit pavement. But something in me knew, and I mean knew, that whatever this was, it didn't want me to run. It wanted me to stay. It fed off stillness. So I did something I haven't done in years. I sat down, closed my eyes, and prayed. Not to God exactly, more like to anything watching, anything listening. I didn't ask for escape, I just asked for clarity, the kind that lets you tell dream from waking, because I was starting to lose the thread. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up at dawn, mouth dry, body aching like I'd been held in place all night. The lights were back on, the fridge was humming, and outside it was quiet again, too quiet. And there, next to the first handprint, a second. This one facing the other way, as if something had climbed in or climbed out. My skin went cold. It wasn't just the shape or the size that bothered me. It was what I saw on the palm, a mark, not a smudge, not dirt, a symbol. I took a picture, but the photo came out blank, just glare, like it erased itself. I didn't pack, I didn't think. I just got in the driver's seat and started the engine. But when I pulled onto the dirt road, something strange happened. The GPS didn't load. Not just slow, it was blank. A gray void where the map should be. Compass spinning. I was too shaken to think straight, so I kept driving anyway, following the direction I thought I came in from. But the road looked wrong. The turns didn't match. Landmarks were missing. A hill I passed on the way in wasn't there anymore. A dry creek bed now cut across where the road should have been. I pulled over, got out, walked a few feet from the RV and looked around. That's when I saw the loop. The campground. The exact same spot I had just left. Same picnic table. Same view. I'd made a full circle without turning. I stared at the RV, then back at the horizon. Something was wrong with the land. No, not wrong. Shifting. Rearranging itself around me. And for the first time since I hit the road 5 months ago, I felt something deeper than fear. I felt unwelcome. The desert didn't want me here, but something else did. Something that wasn't finished yet. And I knew then, this wasn't about camping. This wasn't about isolation. This was about unraveling, a test not of survival, but of sanity. I didn't get back in the RV right away. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it. My rig, the one place that was supposed to be mine, my shelter, my home, and it looked different now. Not physically, not visibly, but something about it felt off. Like when you wake up in your own bed and for a few seconds you don't recognize the ceiling. Everything around me had that feeling. The desert looked the same, sure, same brush, same cracked earth, but I couldn't shake the sense that it was a stage set. A copy, too still, too precise. Like I was walking through a version of reality built from memory, and some detail was just slightly wrong. I thought about my brother, about calling again. But when I pulled out my phone, it was dead. Fully charged when I left. Wouldn't even boot. I tried the backup battery. Nothing. I powered up the dash unit. No signal. The GPS still showed that gray fog, and the compass needle spun without direction like it was caught in a magnetic storm. I climbed into the cab and just sat there with the keys in the ignition, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt studied, like whatever was out here, whatever was playing with the landscape, with time, with my perception, it was learning me, adapting, testing. And the worst part, a piece of me wanted to know what would happen if I stayed. That's the thing about extended solitude on the road. There's a threshold, a tipping point where the mind starts looping on itself. You begin to crave your own destruction just to prove the fear was real. But I didn't want to die out here. I wanted to leave. So I picked a direction and drove. West, I think. The road was more like a suggestion than a path. Tire ruts over cracked dust and gravel. I drove with the windows down, no music, no distractions, just the wind and the low thrum of the engine as my only company. Hours passed. The sun moved. The heat rose and fell again, and still no other travelers. No signs, no planes overhead, no tire tracks but my own. And then I saw the sign, a small, rusted rectangle off the side of the road, half buried in sand. Cañada Perdida, primitive camp. Same name as before, same exact lettering, but this wasn't the same location. I slammed the brakes. My heart jackhammered in my throat. It wasn't possible. I'd been heading away. I knew I had. I double-checked my mileage. 47 miles logged since I left the loop. And yet, here it was again, that cursed name like it had followed me. Or worse, like I'd never left. This time there were tracks in the dust. Not mine. Footprints. Bare. No clear pattern. Just scattered like someone had been dancing or convulsing. Some prints faced forward, others backward. A few sideways. They circled my RV. Not from before. Fresh. Something had followed me or was already with me. I turned the engine off. And that's when I noticed it was quiet. Not rural quiet. Not peaceful silence. I mean, empty. Like the whole world had been muted. No wind, no bugs, no heat shimmer. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind of silence that only exists when you're not supposed to be somewhere. I stepped out again, this time holding the crowbar I kept under the driver's seat. I walked 10 feet from the RV and crouched down near the prints. The dirt was disturbed, but the pressure was wrong, too light, like whatever left them barely weighed anything at all. That's when I heard it. A breath. Not mine. Right behind me. I spun, crowbar raised, but there was nothing, just air. But the breath had been warm, hot even, against the back of my neck. My body flooded with adrenaline. I ran to the RV, threw myself inside, and locked every latch. I closed every blind, covered the skylight, and sat in the middle of the floor in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Slow, shallow. I thought about my ex-wife, about why I really left. Not just the divorce, not just the suburban implosion, but the fact that I was already unraveling long before that. I used to lie in bed at night and imagine people watching me. Not neighbors, not strangers, just others. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the ceiling, sure there was something above it, waiting. That creeping dread from childhood never quite left me. I just buried it under bills and lawn care and weekends at Target, but now it was back, raw and pure. RV life didn't bring it out. It peeled it back. And in that moment, sitting on the vinyl floor in the middle of nowhere, I realized something with icy clarity. This place wasn't hunting me. It was reflecting me, mirroring the parts I'd never faced, the thoughts I'd drowned in noise, the guilt, the avoidance, the cowardice. It was stripping everything away until there was nothing left but the mind. And that's where the real terror lives. That night, the knocking returned, but not just on one side this time, all around. Not simultaneous, sequential, like a clock winding down. Tap on the back panel, 2 on the side door, a knock on the roof. Then silence. Then something breathing inside the air vents. I backed away from the dashboard, heart in my throat, as condensation began forming on the inside of the windshield, not from temperature, from exhale. I saw the pattern, a slow circle expanding outward like a breath fogging the glass. I turned the ignition. It clicked, then failed. Battery, 100%. Power systems, fine. But the engine wouldn't turn. It was holding me there, trapping me in the loop. And I realized then this wasn't a campsite. It was a crucible, and the test had only just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Even if I wanted to, even if exhaustion clawed at the backs of my eyes, there was no rest in that place. Not anymore. Not in that RV. Not with the walls breathing like lungs. I sat on the floor, legs pulled in tight, arms wrapped around myself like I could somehow hold the world out with pressure alone. The knocking had stopped, but something worse replaced it. A stillness so intense it felt like gravity shifted inside the rig. The air was wrong. Heavier near the corners, lighter in the center. I kept staring at the door like it might open, like something might step through it and say what I was already thinking. You're not getting out. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed I might not. That I'd parked in a place the maps didn't show for a reason. That I'd driven off the edge of the world without realizing it. And that I had brought all of it with me. Not the thing outside, but the thing inside. And now they'd met, finally, in the middle of the desert, where nothing human lives long. By morning, my face was gray in the mirror, eyes sunken, jaw clenched like it had locked overnight. I poured water into the kettle and just stood there, waiting for it to boil, as if that one domestic ritual might bring the world back into alignment. It didn't. The RV's reflection on the window, it was off. Subtle, but wrong. The curtains were closed in real life, but open in the reflection. I moved slightly to the left, watched my own shoulder slide into view, and then freeze. The reflection didn't match me, just for a second. Then it caught up. I stared at it for a long time, and then without thinking, I turned and slammed the curtain shut. I didn't want to see anymore. I didn't want to know what else it might show me. But the damage was done. Reality had bent, not just cracked. Bent. I stepped outside, needing air, needing heat, needing to feel something normal. But the desert was cooler than it should have been for morning. A low mist had settled over the dirt, rolling in patches, clinging low. That's not natural. Not out here. This wasn't a place for fog. There was no moisture, no bodies of water, nothing to make this vapor drift over the gravel like it had purpose. But there it was, and beneath it, movement. I crouched low near a rise in the land and squinted. About 20 yards off, I saw a figure. Bent, small, not quite walking, more like dragging itself, the same direction I'd driven yesterday, same loop. Again, I watched as it paused and straightened slowly, unnaturally, as if it didn't know what standing meant. Then it turned toward me. I ducked behind the brush instinctively, waited. Nothing. When I peeked again, it was gone. No prints, no trail, no fog. Just open dirt and dead grass. I backed away slowly, every hair on my arm standing straight up. Then I saw them again. More footprints. Bare. Random. Like someone had walked backwards in circles and then crawled under the RV. And in the sand, drawn with a stick or maybe a finger, was another symbol. This one different from the handprint. More geometric. 3 interlocked shapes. A triangle, a spiral, and something like a distorted eye. I didn't touch it. I didn't erase it. I just went inside and locked everything again. And I sat and sat. The desert sun moved. Time passed. But the pressure didn't lift. The loop stayed tight around me, like a belt cinching against my ribs. And then the light changed again. That's the part that broke me. The light. At exactly 4:11 p.m., I remember because I checked the microwave clock, the sunlight outside shifted hue. Not dimmed, not brightened. Shifted to blue, just slightly, like someone turned a filter over the world, a sky-colored tint that cast the whole campground in a wrong light glow. And the shadows, they started pointing the wrong direction. Instead of stretching west like they should have, mine curled toward the east, away from the sun, away from sense. I stood there, watching my own shadow bend in a way that didn't match my body's position, and felt something deep in my spine begin to crack. Not physically, but psychologically, like a split down the middle of my understanding. What do you do when the sun stops behaving? What do you do when the earth lies? I screamed, loud, raw, not at anyone, just into the air, just to make sound, to punch a hole in the silence. I yelled until my throat went raw. Then I heard something yell back. Not an echo, not even close. It came from inside the storage bay beneath the RV, a low, guttural mimic of my voice. It repeated the scream, wrong, warped, slower than I'd said it, like it was chewing on the sound. I dropped to my knees, my hands dug into the linoleum. I was shaking. I wanted out. I wanted out. But the RV wouldn't start. The map wouldn't change. And every window showed the same campground. No matter what direction I turned, like the land had folded over on itself, wrapping me inside, like a paper box. And I was the match inside it, waiting to burn. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up to darkness. A darkness so thick it felt physical, like velvet stretched over my eyes. I reached up, groping blindly for the light switch on the wall above my head, but when I flicked it, nothing happened. No click, no flicker, no buzz of a dying bulb, just nothing. That's when I realized the hum of the refrigerator was gone again. The inverter was silent. Every system inside the rig was dead, even the emergency lights. My watch screen was blank. The only thing still working was the wind, and even that felt wrong. It wasn't moving through the vents anymore. It was moving inside the rig, like breath, slow, wet, rhythmic. I slid out of bed, bare feet touching the cold vinyl floor. My hand went straight to the knife near the sink. My last defense, even if I knew by now it wasn't going to matter. I wasn't dealing with anything I could cut. That was the worst part, the slow realization that this wasn't about danger in the physical sense. This was about mental collapse. The kind that strips away your coping mechanisms layer by layer until you're left with just you, naked and exposed in the dark. I didn't know if this was a place or a state of mind. I don't even know anymore if there's a difference. I crept toward the front of the rig. The windows were covered in condensation again. Not from heat, not from cold, but from something breathing too close to the glass. I swiped a palm-sized circle clear with my sleeve and stared out. And there it was, my RV. Another one. Same make, same model, same rust spots and bumper sticker I'd put on myself in Arizona. Parked just 30 feet in front of me, angled the same direction. Curtains closed, identical down to the dent in the door from the time I clipped that post in Amarillo. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. Still there. I opened the rig's door slowly, stepped down onto the cold dirt, and approached it, feet crunching softly over gravel. My heart felt like it was beating too slow, like my body was suppressing panic through sheer fatigue. I circled it. Everything matched. Right down to the solar panel I'd installed, crooked after 2 beers and a bad YouTube tutorial. I pressed my hand to the door. It was warm. Something was inside. I didn't knock. I couldn't. I just stood there, breathing, until the door handle moved. Not turned. Twitched. Like a hand inside had jerked it instinctively at my presence. I stumbled back, and that's when the door opened. No one stood there, just dark, a gaping hole where the interior should be. But I heard something. A voice. My voice. Not echoing, not distorted, clear, calm, even. It said, "Come inside." I backed away, shaking, muttering no, no, no over and over like repetition might hold reality in place. Then the lights inside that second RV flickered on, but they didn't illuminate furniture or gear or storage cabinets. They lit a mirror, a massive, seamless mirror where the back wall should have been. And in the reflection, I saw myself, but not as I stood. I was smiling, calm, still, like I'd found peace in there, like I'd accepted something I hadn't yet. And behind the me in the mirror, that same long skeletal hand with too many joints rested gently on my shoulder. The fingers were almost human. Almost. I turned and ran, stumbled back to my own rig, slammed the door, locked it, and curled into the corner like a child. The power was still out, the interior colder than it should have been. I whispered to myself over and over, I am still me. I am still me. I am still me. But a voice in the back of my head said something different. You won't be for long. I didn't leave the RV for the rest of the night. Didn't sleep. Didn't eat. I just sat there, waiting for the knock that never came. By morning, the mirror RV was gone, vanished. No tire tracks, no imprints in the dirt, only the faintest scent of something chemical, like old hospital gloves or burnt ozone. I opened every curtain, I paced, I screamed again, not at the desert this time, but at myself. I yelled into the cabinets, the microwave, the sink, the vents. I told myself I wasn't crazy, that the mind is a pattern machine, that isolation rewires perspective, that trauma loops when there's no distraction. But part of me no longer believed that, because if this was a mental breakdown, it was one that knew things about me I'd never told anyone, like what I saw when I closed my eyes that night after the divorce. Like the thing I imagined standing at the edge of my backyard in the dark, watching my house for hours. Tall, pale, too still, like the dream I kept having as a kid, lost in a maze of identical rooms, each with a version of myself inside, all staring at the ceiling, whispering my name. I hadn't thought of that dream in 30 years. But I remembered it now, because this felt the same. This was the maze. And if that's true, then somewhere out here is the room I never reached in the dream, the last door, and I think whatever's behind it has been waiting a long, long time for me to find it. I didn't drive anymore. There was no point. The desert always brought me back, no matter the direction, no matter the hour, no matter how far I thought I'd gone. I'd tested it, marked trees with red surveyor's tape, drew lines in the sand, buried my own tire tracks with shovels of dirt to see if they would stay disturbed. They didn't. Every morning, they were gone. Replaced, smoothed over, like time rewound itself every night, resetting the stage just enough to make me question what I'd done. Even the sun seemed wrong now. It rose from the wrong side 2 days in a row. Or maybe it didn't rise at all. Maybe the land just shifted around it. Either way, I stopped tracking hours. There was no sequence anymore. Just pulses of light, then dark, then light again. The dreams got worse. When I slept, if you could call it that, I'd see myself wandering the campground, barefoot, arms swaying like I was underwater. Sometimes I was inside the rig looking out at myself. Sometimes I was under the rig, watching through a grate as someone else drove it, wearing my face. But in the dreams, I never spoke. I just watched. And I always smiled. Not with joy, with surrender. That was the most terrifying part of all. It wasn't fear I saw in my own eyes. It was peace, like I'd accepted something. And I was beginning to understand what that something was. This desert, it wasn't a location. It was a threshold, a place the mind slips into when it's been unguarded too long. A net for broken people who thought the wilderness would heal them. A place for the lonely, the lost, the guilty, the ones who carry too many versions of themselves in one body. And it wasn't here to kill me. It was here to replace me. Piece by piece. Every hour I stayed, something of me went missing. My memories got soft, fuzzy. I'd catch myself reaching for things that weren't there, like a wristwatch I haven't worn in years. I tried to call my brother again, and I couldn't remember his number. Couldn't remember if he even existed. The voice on the radio wasn't mine anymore. I turned it on one morning out of desperation, just static as usual. But then a voice broke through. Calm. Measured, familiar. It said my name. Then it said, "This is the version of you that stayed." Static again. Then silence. I threw the damn radio against the fridge and watched it shatter, but deep down, I knew the damage had already been done. Whatever was out there or in here, it was wearing me thin. It didn't need to force its way in. It just needed to wait until I let go of the last thread. And I was close. So close. The night it almost won, I saw the fire, a soft orange glow in the distance, the first real sign of life I'd seen in what felt like weeks. I stumbled toward it like a starving man. My boots dragged, my limbs didn't move right anymore, like gravity was stronger here. But I didn't care. I needed someone, anyone. I crested a small ridge, breath shallow in my throat, and there it was, a small campfire flickering low, surrounded by 3 folding chairs. Empty. Steam rose from a coffee mug on the dirt. Still hot. Still fresh. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I circled the fire once. Then again, and then I saw it. On the back of one chair, slung casually like someone had just left for a moment. My jacket. The one I lost in Colorado last year before I even bought the RV. Same burn mark on the left sleeve, same torn hem. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. It smelled like me, not sweat, not dust. Me. That specific scent you never notice until it's gone, like cedar soap and cheap Motel shampoo and nervous skin. And then I heard the fire crackle differently. Not louder, just off rhythm. It pulsed, then bent, like wind had touched it, though there was no wind. And I looked across the fire and saw myself sitting there. Not a dream, not a hallucination, not a mirror. Me. Slouched, relaxed, legs stretched out like I was on vacation, wearing the shirt I threw away 2 states ago, holding my old enamel mug, the one I'd left behind at a rest stop in Wyoming. It smiled, and it said, "It's easier if you don't fight it." I didn't move, didn't breathe. It nodded toward the third chair. "Come on, sit down. It's what you wanted. No schedules, no bills, no people to disappoint, just sky and peace." I took a step back. He chuckled. "Still not ready, huh?" He stood slowly, just like me. Same posture, same limp, same scar above the left knee from the chain link fence incident when I was 14. "You can leave if you want," he said, "but it won't change anything. The road just leads back to here, because here is where you belong now." The fire went cold in an instant. The glow snuffed like someone exhaled on a candle. And in that final flicker of light, I saw their eyes. All 3 chairs were full now. 3 versions of me, older, younger, distant, all watching me, all waiting. And I turned and ran, back through the dust, through the hills, through the cold, past the rig, into the dark. I didn't stop running until I collapsed, shaking, sobbing, laughing. Because I finally understood what the test really was. It wasn't about escape. It was about surrender. And the longer I resisted, the more it hollowed me out. I don't know how long I laid there. Maybe hours, maybe days. I don't even know if time moves the same way in this place anymore. But I remember the way the dirt felt beneath me, colder than it should have been, almost wet, like the earth was breathing through its pores, like it was alive. I opened my eyes and saw stars, not the kind you recognize from the back of a pickup truck on a clear night. These stars were wrong. Too many, too close. They pulsed, not with light, with intention, like they were waiting for me to ask the right question, but I didn't. I just closed my eyes again and whispered one word: please. It wasn't a prayer, it wasn't a demand. It was the last whisper of a man who no longer trusted his mind, and the desert heard me. Because the next time I opened my eyes, I was back in the RV, lying on the floor exactly where I'd been before I ran. Same posture, same jacket still clutched in my hands, like nothing had happened. Except everything had. The lights were back on, the hum of the refrigerator had returned, the smell of propane and melted plastic was gone. But on the wall, scratched into the wallpaper just above the bed, was a message, long and thin, written with something that wasn't a pen. "The more of you there are, the less of you is left." I stared at that sentence until the words lost meaning. Then I started laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was true. This place wasn't trying to kill me. It was duplicating me, slicing pieces off, every memory, every habit, every old thought I didn't deal with, every lie I told myself about being free or healed just because I lived on wheels. All of it was being stripped, copied, archived in whatever dark vault this place used to store its prey. And I was beginning to forget which parts were me. I started writing things down. Anything I remembered. Street names, childhood memories. My first job, my mom's favorite band, just to see what still lived inside me. But every morning, the notebook pages were blank. The ink gone, the pen bone dry. I tried carving them into the table, but the scratches filled themselves in by sunset, like the rig was healing or rejecting me. The only thing that stayed, that refused to fade, was the symbol on the cabinet, that twisted triangle eye spiral I'd seen in the sand. It kept reappearing. No matter how many times I wiped it away, I gave up trying to decode it. It wasn't meant to be understood. It was meant to be recognized. And one night I did. Not because I solved it, but because I saw it again, not on the RV, not in the sand, but on my own chest, reflected in the mirror. A raised pattern like scar tissue, like it had always been there. And suddenly I remembered the dream, the maze of rooms, the endless doors, each room containing a version of me, doing something familiar, something habitual, tying my boots, fixing the same broken hinge, looking out the same window, waiting for the same person who never came. But one room had always been locked, and now I knew why. Because that room wasn't a room at all. It was a choice, a singular moment when a man decides whether to stay himself or let the world peel him apart and wear him like a costume. And now, that door was open. It stood at the edge of the campground one morning, just there, freestanding, no frame, no hinges, just a wooden door planted upright in the dirt. I knew it hadn't been there the night before, and I knew what waited on the other side. A choice. I could open it, walk through. Let go of everything, name, memory, identity, become another version, join the others, find peace in the surrender, or I could stay. Alone, fractured, haunted by myself. It felt like hours that I stood there, staring at the door. I put my hand on the knob. It was warm, familiar, like something I'd touched 1,000 times in a life I no longer remembered. And just as I began to turn it, the wind picked up, hard, sudden, hot, and it spoke. Not in words, not in language, but in something deeper, older, the feeling behind speech. And what it said was, "You are not done suffering." I jerked my hand back like it burned me, took one step away, then another, and the door fell, flat, silent, disappeared into the dust like it had never been there at all. And I knew I had passed the test, not by surrendering, not by solving, but by refusing to abandon myself, refusing to let my mind be carved and divided and stored like spare parts. I wasn't healed, I wasn't whole, but I was me. And that was enough. I woke up the next morning with the sun cutting through the blinds in clean white bands. No haze, no copper tint, no humming beneath the floorboards, just silence, just light. I didn't believe it at first. I lay still for what felt like an hour, just listening. No footsteps on the roof, no echoing breaths from vents that shouldn't breathe, no whispers behind the cabinets. It was all gone. Or maybe I was. I slid out of bed and moved through the rig like it might collapse under my weight, like any shift might snap me back into the place where the desert thinks. But the floor was solid. The refrigerator buzzed. My little stove clicked to life with a soft blue flame, and my reflection in the microwave door didn't blink when I did. I stepped outside. The air was cool, crisp, the kind of clean desert morning you never forget, with blue so deep it feels like you could fall upward into it if you stared too long. My boots touched real dirt. My shadow was mine again. And the other RV, the mirror image, it was gone. No tire tracks, no scent, no trace of any of it. But something inside me had changed. You don't go through something like that and come out clean. You don't stare into a place that wears your face and expect the old routines to feel real anymore. You don't keep moving just to say you're free. Because the truth is, RV living will break you. Not because of what's out there, but because of what's in here. Inside the silence, inside the long miles, inside the late nights with no cell service and nothing but your own thoughts pressing against the walls like a slow leak in the plumbing. You start off thinking you're escaping something, the bills, the boss, the routine, but what you're really doing is peeling the insulation off yourself, one layer at a time, until you find out if you can stand being alone with the engine of your own mind. That's the test. Not the storms, not the breakdowns. Not even the supernatural echoes that the desert sometimes loans you when you camp too long in one place. It's you. You are the obstacle. You are the whisper in the dark, and you are the only thing that will save you. That next week, I didn't move. I stayed in that same patch of dust, just long enough to feel real again, to walk without paranoia, to sleep without seeing mirrored versions of myself behind my eyes. I cooked eggs. I listened to birds. I made coffee and drank it slowly, and then I drove north. No map, no playlist, just me, my rig, and the road. But something stayed behind, and maybe that's okay, because not every piece of you was meant to come with you to the end. Some versions of yourself were only ever meant to survive long enough for you to outgrow them. The man who first bought this RV, that wide-eyed, half-healed shell of someone crawling out of a bad divorce and thinking a house on wheels would fix what therapy hadn't, he didn't make it back. But someone else did. Someone who knows now what it means to live without distraction. Someone who can sit still when the quiet gets loud. Someone who knows that fear isn't something to escape, it's something to examine. That's the real gift of RV living. It doesn't give you peace. It forces you to earn it. And the price is everything you thought you were. I look back sometimes, not out of regret, but out of respect. Because I think part of me will always be in that patch of desert, somewhere between waking and memory, staring at a door that no longer exists, refusing to walk through. And if you ever find yourself in that place, wherever your version of it is, just remember, the test isn't whether you see something terrifying. The test is whether you recognize the face it wears, and whether you let it define you, or walk away still holding your name. I kept mine. Even when the wind called it, even when the mirror smiled, even when I didn't believe I was real anymore. I kept it because that is mental fortitude. And out here on the open road, in the long nights, the empty spaces, the moments when no one's watching but the desert, that's the only thing that can't be taken from you. Unless you give it away. So don't, no matter what knocks on your door. I didn't go out there looking for anything. That's the part that sticks with me now. I wasn't chasing a vision quest or looking to disconnect like all those online types say. I just wanted a few quiet days in the woods. I wanted to sleep without headlights cutting across my ceiling. I wanted to hear trees again. Olympic National Park had always called to me, but not in a romantic way. It wasn't about the brochures or the pristine alpine lakes or whatever people post on Instagram. It was the stillness I remembered from when I was a kid. My dad used to take me up there during the off-season, late fall, early spring, when the trails were muddy and empty and the air tasted like wet stone. So when I requested time off and packed my gear, it wasn't some epic decision. I just threw my old pack in the car, left my phone in the glove box, and drove west until the gas station sign started fading behind tall trees. There's a point out there where the air just changes. It thickens, but not in a humid way. It's like the forest is trying to remember something. And the deeper you go, the quieter it gets, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. More like something's waiting. The trailhead was empty when I pulled in. A cracked lot, a faded map bolted to a moss-covered sign, and silence. No other cars, no ranger, just me and the fog creeping off the treetops. I checked my gear one last time. 3 days worth of food, water filter, tent, my old journal, and a satellite beacon I hadn't used in years. It felt excessive, but the park's terrain is nothing to screw around with, especially solo. Once you're off trail, it doesn't take much to get turned around. My plan was simple. Hike into the valley along the ridge loop, find a backcountry spot away from the designated sites, and just sit with the forest. I wasn't going to post about it. No GPS pins, no followers, no playlists. Just me, the trees, and the space between them. The hike-in was uneventful in that beautiful, worn kind of way. My boots sunk into soft earth. Pine needles whispered beneath every step. Ferns the size of my torso arched over the path. It had rained 2 nights before, so everything glistened. Branches still heavy with dew, the occasional crow cawing out of sight. A kind of rhythm started to build, like the forest was breathing and I was falling into step with it. By late afternoon, I found a clearing slightly elevated above the valley floor, tucked between 2 large Sitka spruces. It wasn't an official site, no fire ring, no bare wires, but it felt right, secluded but not choked in, with a good vantage on the slope and a faint trickle of water nearby. I set up my tent, unrolled the sleeping pad, and boiled water for freeze-dried lentils. Everything was routine, muscle memory, and yet, even then, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder more than usual. It wasn't anything I could name, just the trees. They leaned in a certain way, branches a little too still for the breeze. I told myself it was the silence, After all, in a city, you forget that silence isn't supposed to be clean. It's supposed to have layers, distant bird calls, insects ticking under bark, the slow breath of the forest itself. But that first night, as the sun vanished behind the ridge and the stars peeked through a misty veil, I noticed something else. It was too quiet, not silent, but controlled, like the woods had swallowed the sounds before they reached me. I zipped myself into the tent early that night, just after sunset. My watch read 6:43 p.m., but it felt like midnight. The light just drained. And that's when I heard the first whisper. It came just as I started to drift, half asleep, half aware of the ache in my shoulders. A soft, breathy hiss from just outside the tent wall. Not words, just the impression of them, like someone speaking through a wool blanket from 5 feet away. I froze. It wasn't wind. Wind moves branches. This moved the air. For a full minute, I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. I strained my ears. Nothing. Just the weight of the forest pressing against the nylon walls. Eventually, I convinced myself it was runoff, water echoing off the stones, maybe even my own breath catching in the cold air. I'd been out there 12 hours. Solo hiking does weird things to your perception. Sound can bend, bounce. I told myself that and drifted off. The next morning, everything looked normal. Damp pine needles, a few raccoon tracks near my camp. Even a patch of sun broke through the mist for a few minutes. I brewed instant coffee, scribbled in my journal, and tried not to think about the night before. If anything, I blamed the altitude. Or maybe the quiet had just gotten to me. I hadn't spoken out loud in over a day. But something else happened that morning, something I didn't notice until after I packed up. A circle, pressed into the earth behind my tent. Not deep, but definite. Maybe a foot wide. No shoe prints, no animal markings, just a ring of flattened moss and pine debris, perfectly round. I stared at it for a while, walked around it, touched the edges with my boot. It didn't mean anything. Could have been a deer bedding down or a fungus ring disturbed by the weather. I told myself a lot of things. Still, I moved camp that afternoon. Only a mile deeper into the valley, but just enough to feel like I'd done something about it. That second night, I chose a tighter spot, taller trees, closer branches, no real view. I didn't care about the scenery anymore. I just wanted a wall of bark and fern between me and whatever had circled my tent. I didn't journal that night, didn't cook, just ate a protein bar cold and slipped into the sleeping bag as darkness settled. I left my boots by the door and kept the knife closer than usual, not out of fear. I told myself, just readiness. And again, sometime after midnight, I heard it. A whisper. This time, clearer. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but the words were mine. A sentence I'd written once, buried deep in an old notebook. Something I'd never said out loud, and even to my closest friend. But it came from outside, just beyond the nylon, spoken low as if repeated back to me. Mimicked. And that's when I stopped pretending it was wind. I didn't move, not for a long time. Just lay there, heart pounding so hard it felt like my chest might burst. Listening. The voice didn't speak again, but the air outside stayed tight, like the trees were holding their breath. I stared at the ceiling of the tent, barely blinking. My sleeping bag suddenly felt like a trap, too tight, too warm, like it might smother me before the forest ever had a chance. The thing is, I remembered exactly what the voice said. I knew the sentence because I'd written it years ago, alone in my apartment during one of those late-night spirals when the silence turns cruel. It wasn't poetry. It was a confession. Something raw and ugly I'd scratched into the margin of a journal and never showed anyone. I wish I could forget what I saw in the river. That was it. 7 words I'd never spoken out loud, not once. My throat went dry. I couldn't think straight. Because that phrase didn't just belong to me. It was me. That sentence came from a place I didn't even like to look at in the mirror. And now something in the woods had whispered it back to me, with a voice I didn't recognize, but a tone I couldn't ignore. It was calm, patient, like it was waiting for me to answer. But I didn't. I couldn't. I spent the rest of that night frozen stiff, knife in hand, staring at the silhouette of the tent's roof. Every branch scrape, Every pine needle shifting, every distant creak in the forest sent new pulses through my chest, but nothing else came. No footsteps, no animal sounds, just that silence again. Too thick, too uniform, like the woods were protecting the echo of that voice. By dawn, my face felt numb and my neck ached from the tension. My back was drenched in cold sweat. When I finally unzipped the tent, the air hit me like a slap, sharp and metallic, the way it smells after lightning, though there hadn't been any storms. Everything outside looked the same. No marks, no footprints, just dew-damp earth and the steady drip of morning condensation. But when I looked to my left, toward the path I'd taken the night before, I stopped cold. There was a second circle. Same size, same shape, same perfect compression in the moss. This one maybe 15 feet from my tent, just far enough to see from where I'd sat if I dared to look. I didn't eat, didn't journal, just packed in silence and left. I don't remember much of the hike that morning, only that I didn't follow the trail. I went down slope, cut through brush and creek beds, letting instinct guide me. Something in my body said, don't go back, don't retrace your steps. So I didn't. I bushwhacked for hours, trying to get far enough from whatever had found me. Around midday, I came across a section of old logging road, half eaten by moss and undergrowth. I followed it until it led to a clearing, a small one, probably 50 feet across, surrounded by tight clusters of hemlock and pine. The light broke through in shafts here, catching dust motes in the air like glitter in water. It felt wrong, too symmetrical, too clean. But I was tired and my legs felt like iron, so I set up again. Third night. New spot. This time, I didn't even pretend to relax. I kept the knife next to me and stayed awake as long as I could, staring through the mesh of the tent's ceiling, watching the branches shift in the wind. But that night, the wind didn't come. The trees stopped moving. Completely. And the whispers returned. Not just one this time, several, layered, overlapping like static through an old radio. I couldn't make out the words at first, but the tones were familiar. Low, conspiratorial, like the way people talk about you when they think you're asleep. Then, one of them said my name. Not just the way a stranger might guess it. It said my name exactly the way my brother used to before he died. Same cadence, same soft southern drawl. He'd always drawn out the vowels, especially when he was tired. My mouth went dry. I sat up slowly, listening hard. Then came the second voice. My ex. Same tone she used when she was angry, but trying not to cry. She said, "Why do you always disappear?" Then laughter. Soft, disjointed. A third voice. This one mine. I swear to God, I heard my own voice coming from the trees, repeating something I hadn't said in years. Don't look behind you. And just like that, the wind came rushing back in. Hard and sudden, as if the forest had exhaled all at once. The tent walls pushed inward. Pine needles whipped across the ground, branches groaned, and then silence again. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat, back pressed to the far wall of the tent, knife across my knees, waiting for something to move. But nothing did. Only in the gray, uncertain wash of dawn did I dare step outside again. I didn't even bother with the usual checks. No stove, no journal, no water refill. I threw everything into the pack haphazardly, tugged the straps tight, and started moving again, this time with no plan, no direction, just away. Hours passed, maybe more. My GPS was still clipped to my chest strap, but I didn't dare check it. I didn't want to see where I was, didn't want to see how far I drifted off course. The deeper I went, the more the forest changed. The trail disappeared altogether. The undergrowth thickened, swallowing any sign of human path. Moss climbed higher on the trees, sometimes past my head. Light barely filtered in now, and when it did, it came in strange patterns, like it bent around something I couldn't see. And the sound, it was back. Not whispering this time. Repeating, a single phrase, over and over again, "Don't go back, don't go back, don't go back." The words didn't echo. They just hovered in the stillness, in the space between pine trunks, in the shadows where no light reached. I stopped walking because now I wasn't sure if the voice was outside my head or inside it. I think there's a moment when your mind stops trying to make sense of things, when the logic centers just switch off. Not out of panic, not yet, but out of something older, something deeper, a survival instinct that says, you don't need to understand this to be in danger. That's where I was. Standing in moss to my ankles, breath fogging in the middle of the day, surrounded by trees so tall they blotted out the sun. The air hung heavy, unmoving, and still that phrase looped around me like a broken signal. Don't go back, don't go back, don't go back. But I hadn't tried to go back. I'd done everything I could to move forward, away, deeper, whatever it took to escape whatever was circling my tent. But now the voice, whether it was real or just some splintering part of my mind, was warning me against something I didn't understand. And in that moment, I realized something far worse than fear. I was lost, truly lost. Not just off trail, not just disoriented, but moved. I checked the GPS finally, and it just blinked a soft red dot in the middle of a blank screen. No coordinates, no connection. It hadn't been tracking me. Either I hadn't turned it on or something else. I stood there too long. My legs started to ache. The pack dug into my shoulders. I chose a direction at random, picked a landmark, a stump hollowed out with rot, and started toward it. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the air itself didn't want me moving, like gravity deepened the farther I walked. Eventually I reached a cluster of nurse logs and dropped the pack. My throat burned with thirst, but the water bottle was empty. I reached for the filter canteen, but the stream I'd passed hours ago was gone, or maybe it had never been there at all. That's when I heard it again, a different whisper. This time, closer, louder, like someone crouched just behind me and breathed directly into my ear. You left him. I froze. I didn't need to ask who it meant. I hadn't spoken about my brother in years. Not really. He'd drowned when we were teenagers. A rafting trip gone wrong. I was in the other boat, upriver. I didn't see it happen, but I heard it. His voice, somewhere between panic and confusion, calling out over the water. And then silence. It wasn't my fault. That's what they told me. But I'd always wondered, if I had gotten there 30 seconds faster, if I had recognized the change in current, maybe I could have pulled him out. Now the forest was using that against me. You left him. I spun around, eyes wide. Nothing, only trees. But I started to see faces. Not real ones. Impressions. In bark. In the shape of twisted roots. In shadows that moved without wind. They looked familiar. One resembled my old therapist, the one I stopped seeing after he told me I was projecting. Another looked like my mother, just the shape of her nose in the knot of a tree. A third, my own face, just older, drawn, hollow-eyed. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't want to run, but my body started moving on its own. Feet pounding moss, shoulders scraping past hanging limbs, breath coming in sharp gasps that clouded before my face even though the air wasn't cold. I ran until my lungs burned and my knees buckled, and even then I kept moving, hands outstretched, pushing through ferns and underbrush that seemed to reach for me. Eventually, I collapsed into another clearing, this one ringed in younger trees, thinner trunks, more daylight. I hit the ground hard, laid there for a while, cheek pressed against damp soil, the world spinning under my eyelids, and then quiet. No whispers, no wind. Just the soft tick of sweat dripping onto pine needles. It almost felt normal, like whatever I'd crossed through had been a pocket, a bad dream inside the forest. I sat up, tried to steady my breath, and that's when I saw something ahead of me. A tent. No movement, no sign of life. Just a single faded green backpacking tent, the kind sold in big box stores, pitched awkwardly on a sloped incline. It looked old, not ancient, but forgotten. I called out hoarsely. No response. Approaching it felt wrong, like walking toward a mirage. But I did it anyway, half crawling through the underbrush. The tent flap was partially unzipped. I reached out, heart in my throat, and peeled it back. Inside, I found a sleeping bag, rotted in places, damp with mold, a rusted camp stove, and a journal. My breath caught. The cover was black, water-warped, the kind I used to carry before switching to digital notes. I opened it. The first page was blank, second page too. Third had writing, but not mine, not ink. It looked like it had been scratched into the page with something sharp. Nails, maybe. A knife. just one sentence. I'm still here. The rest of the pages were torn out. I backed away slowly, skin crawling, every hair on my arms rising like static. My brain screamed at me to leave, but my legs refused. Something about the shape of the letters, the way they curved, they felt familiar. They looked like mine. Not just similar, identical. Down to the slant of the and the way I crossed my tis, and then just beyond the tent, I saw it. Another circle, same as before, pressed into the moss, waiting. I don't know how long I stared at that circle. It was just moss, compressed into a perfect ring, the kind you could step over without even noticing. But standing there in that clearing, with the tent sagging behind me and the journal clutched in my hand, it felt like a boundary, like the edge of something I wasn't meant to cross. And the worst part, I didn't remember writing in the journal, but I remembered that sentence. I'm still here. It echoed somewhere deep in me, like a phrase half recalled from a dream, or a voice I'd silenced a long time ago. It felt like the forest hadn't just spoken, it had remembered something I wanted to forget. The wind shifted, barely a breeze, but enough to push the flap of the old tent aside. Inside, something glinted, a piece of broken mirror, cracked with dirt smeared across it. I didn't mean to look, but I did, and for a split second I saw my reflection. Not as I was now, older, thinner, pale like someone who hadn't seen sunlight in months. My face slack, eyes wide with a kind of fear I didn't recognize, a kind of acceptance. And behind me, just behind my shoulder, movement. I spun, breath caught in my throat. Nothing. Only trees. But they were closer than before, the trunks tighter, leaning, angled as if they'd shifted while I looked away, like they'd crept forward on roots too slow to notice in real time. I dropped the journal, left it there, half buried in needles, and started walking again. Not running. I didn't have that kind of energy left, just moving, one foot after the other, forcing myself deeper into the woods even as my instincts screamed to stop. But that's the thing out there. There's no back, no familiar trail, no worn footprints. The forest shifts, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just shows you what you're most afraid to see. I walked until my legs trembled and my pack felt like it was pulling me into the earth. The sky overhead was pale, the kind of gray that makes time stop. Could have been noon, could have been evening. Eventually, I found another ridge, a narrow rise with a sheer drop on one side, overlooking a ravine choked with mist. I climbed it because it felt like the right direction. Up, toward air, toward clarity. But once I reached the top, I saw something that stopped me cold. Another campsite, familiar. A flattened patch of earth between two Sitka spruces. Small fire pit. Boot prints half washed by rain. It was mine. The first site, the one from 2 nights ago. Same moss ring, same angle of the trees, same pile of broken twigs I'd gathered and never used. I stood there staring, heart sinking. I hadn't gone anywhere. The miles I'd walked, the creek beds, the clearing with the mirror, the tent with the journal, all of it had looped me back. That's when the whisper came again. This time directly behind me. Do you remember now? I didn't turn. I couldn't, because something in my spine said if I looked, I wouldn't see the forest anymore. I'd see a version of myself I wasn't ready to meet. So I stepped forward into my own campsite like a man walking into his own grave. I sat on the log where I'd eaten the first night, pulled off my pack with trembling hands, and I cried. I don't remember the last time I did that. Not like that. Not the kind of tears that come from your stomach instead of your eyes. The kind that shake you, that make sound, because something had broken. Not out there. In me. I tried to write, pulled my small notebook from the outer pouch and opened it to a blank page. But every time I tried to put down words, my hand shook. I wrote my name, then crossed it out, wrote the date, wrong. Tried again. Couldn't remember what day it was. Finally, I just wrote one sentence. I think I've always been here. And as soon as I did, I heard it again. The forest, breathing, not wind, not rustling, breathing, slow, deep. Like it had lungs beneath the moss and stone, exhaling decades at a time. And then the faintest sound, clicking, not mechanical, not animal, a tongue, teeth, a mouth, forming words just past the tree line. And from the dark, I heard my voice again. Don't look away. I closed the journal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there in my own campsite, listening to the forest repeat my thoughts back to me in whispers. Every stray fear, every buried guilt, all of it recycled through the trees like a confession I never meant to give. And sometime near dawn, just before the sun could crest over the ridge, I saw a figure between the spruces. My height, my gait, same pack, same coat. He didn't move, neither did I. I blinked, and he was gone. But the pine needles under my boots had shifted, as if I just walked in. Ow. By the time the sun fully rose, I couldn't tell if I was alive or just lingering. The forest didn't look the same anymore. That's what stood out first. The colors felt wrong, too saturated, like someone had cranked the contrast on a photograph. Greens so deep they looked black, sky bleached to near white. Even the earth had changed beneath me, softer, hungrier. I didn't know how long I'd been awake. My thoughts had stopped forming in straight lines. They looped now, fragments, images, repeated phrases, like the forest had burrowed into the part of my brain that separated thought from echo. I should have run, should have started walking in any direction, but I stayed, because something told me I was closer, not to getting out. No, that illusion had vanished the moment I returned to the first sight. I was closer to understanding, and the truth I was circling terrified me more than the forest itself. I made coffee with the last of my fuel, didn't drink it, just held the cup in my hands and watched steam drift toward the canopy. Even that looked wrong. The way the steam moved, spiraling instead of rising, like it wanted to stay. I looked down at my journal, the one I knew I'd brought with me, and flipped back through the pages. Entries were missing, not torn out, just gone. Whole days vanished. The handwriting on the pages that remained didn't always match. The loop of the eye, the slope of the sea, the spacing between lines. Similar, sure, but not mine. Or maybe it was mine. From another time. Another loop. Somewhere in the woods a twig snapped. Not the kind of casual shift you hear from animals, not the distant crack of falling limbs. This was close, deliberate. I stood, slow. My knees cracked. The movement felt borrowed, like I wasn't quite attached to my body anymore. I scanned the trees, and then I saw him again. Just 10 feet away. Still, watching, me. Same pack, same posture, same everything. He didn't flinch when I moved, didn't speak. He didn't have to, because I knew what he was, me, or what was left of me. A version that stayed too long, that listened too closely, that let the forest finish what it started. I opened my mouth and for the first time in hours spoke. What do you want? The figure tilted its head slow, not curious, knowing. Then it pointed, past me, back toward the circle. I turned. It was larger now. The ring in the moss had widened, stretched to the edge of the clearing, and it wasn't just compressed needles anymore. There were markings etched into the dirt, lines, shapes, language. I didn't recognize, but understood all the same. You don't leave the forest. You become part of it. I backed away, but the trees behind me had shifted again, closed in, bark pressed tight like the ribcage of some ancient thing. No wind, no light. Just the breath of the pines around me rising and falling in slow, rhythmic pulses, and the sound, the whispers again. This time not voices, not words, just breath, everywhere, inside me, around me, and then a hand on my shoulder. I turned, too fast, too desperate. No one was there, but I felt it, cold, familiar. Like my brother's hand on my back when we were kids, telling me not to look. I stumbled forward past the circle through the brush, tripping over roots that hadn't been there seconds before. The woods opened again. Another clearing, same size, same shape, same exact pattern of downed limbs. But this time, the tent was already pitched. Mine, fresh, clean, waiting, and on the log beside it, my journal. Open to a page I hadn't written yet. One sentence in my handwriting. The pines whisper when you're alone. The wind started again, but it wasn't air. It was breath, hundreds of mouths exhaling from the trees. Sighing, repeating, alone, alone. And I finally understood. The forest didn't want me dead. It wanted me heard. Every fear I buried, every guilt I silenced, every memory I refused to hold. It whispered them back in voices I trusted. Not to scare me, to keep me. And I stayed. I stayed because leaving meant losing the only thing that still felt real. Not the gear, not the trail, not even my name. Whatever weight it once carried had long since faded under the silence of the trees. But the whispers, they knew me. Not the person I pretended to be back home, the one who smiled politely, showed up on time, kept every interaction just shallow enough to avoid consequence. No, the forest saw through that, peeled it away like wet bark. And underneath? Grief, shame, a need to disappear so deep I had carved it into my routines. I wasn't hiking to connect with nature. I wasn't on some spiritual retreat. I came out here because I didn't know who I was anymore. And the forest? It didn't ask. It listened. That night, I didn't pitch the tent again. I didn't need to. The ground had softened. The air was warm enough to lie beneath the canopy without freezing. Besides, the tent was already there, pitched ahead of me like a memory waiting to be lived again. I lay back in the dirt, arms folded across my chest. Above me, the trees swayed without wind. Pine needles whispered against each other in a language older than speech. And the forest spoke. Not with sound, not with voices, with memory. I saw flashes behind my eyes, vivid, fragmented, my brother reaching for me through the current. My ex's back turned in a parking lot as I stood with keys in hand, too afraid to call her name. Moments I thought I'd buried. Moments the forest had kept. Somewhere in the distance I heard footsteps, soft, measured, not trying to hide, just present. I sat up slowly. Across the clearing, a figure stepped through the trees. Not me this time. Not a reflection. Someone else. A woman, late 30s maybe. Worn jacket, wide eyes, backpack slung too low, as if it had grown heavy without her noticing. She froze when she saw me. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. She stepped forward cautiously. "You? You're real?" I nodded. It felt like the first true gesture I'd made in days. She exhaled, a sound of exhaustion and disbelief tangled together. I thought I was going crazy. I've been walking in circles for... She stopped, looked past me, to the tent, to the ring. And I saw it happen. The shift. Her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open slightly. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. She saw something she remembered. Maybe her own pack, her own handwriting, her own face reflected in the curve of a tent pole. I stood slowly, approached her. "How long have you been out here?" She didn't answer at first, just kept looking past me. Then she whispered, "It whispers my daughter's name." The words hit like a gut punch. We stood there, two strangers held in place by the gravity of something we didn't choose, something we belonged to now, whether we understood it or not. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my journal, and offered it to her. She took it, flipped through the pages. Her hands trembled. "This is your handwriting?" "Yes," I said. "Some of it." She turned to a blank page, hesitated, then wrote something. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. The forest would keep it, like it kept all things. Later that night, she sat beside me in the dirt, both of us staring at the fireless pit between our boots. No one spoke, but the forest did. And this time, I didn't flinch when I heard my name. I just listened, because that's all it had ever wanted. Not devotion, not fear, just to be heard. To remember. Somewhere deep in the woods, something moved, not toward us, but around us, protective, possessive. We weren't lost, we were held. And in that moment, I didn't want to run, not because I'd given up, but because for the first time in years, I finally felt known. The next morning, she was gone. I woke to the quiet drip of dew from the canopy above, mist curling through the underbrush like breath, and the spot beside me cold. Her pack was gone. No footprints, no indentation where she'd sat. Even the page she'd written in my journal had vanished, clean, as if it had never been touched. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined her. But there, caught under a knot in the moss, was a hair tie. Black, worn, the kind you keep around your wrist long after it's lost its stretch. I tucked it into my shirt pocket more reverently than I meant to. It was proof. Small, but real. That she had been here. That I wasn't the only one the forest had invited in. Still, I didn't search for her. Because I knew the rules now. You don't search in this place. You listen. The more you move, the more the trees turn. Distances stretch or collapse depending on your intention. And if you push too hard, the forest pushes back. Instead, I sat, watched the morning creep over the moss with cautious light. The mist didn't lift like it used to. It lingered low, as if it had nowhere else to be, like it was staying for me. I opened the journal again. This time, it was filled. Page after page in my handwriting. Only I hadn't written them. Not yet. Dates in the future. Thoughts I hadn't had. Memories that hadn't happened. Some entries were lucid. Reflections on the trail. Observations about weather. Even jokes I might have made if I hadn't been so afraid. Others were unraveling. Words repeated in long chains, lines scratched out over and over, entries ending mid-sentence. But the most disturbing thing was that every entry ended the same way. I heard it again tonight. It knows my name. My skin crawled. I closed the journal, not because I couldn't read more, but because I already knew what came next. I'd write those pages. Maybe not today. Maybe not even this loop. But I would. That's what this place did. It didn't just echo your thoughts, it wrote you, layer by layer, version by version, until what you'd been, who you used to be, was buried under the mulch and whispers. I stood, knees stiff. My pack groaned with damp weight. I adjusted the straps, eyes sweeping the tree line. Then I did something I hadn't done in days. I called out. Not a yell, not a scream, just my name, once. Firm, calm, like someone announcing they'd arrived somewhere they were meant to be. The forest didn't answer, not with words, but the trees responded. They swayed, not just in wind, but in rhythm. Synchronized, slow, like lungs inhaling. I stepped forward. They parted, no path, just an invitation. I walked. Not because I trusted where I was going, but because I'd finally stopped trusting what I'd left behind. The trail wound through dense pine, thick moss underfoot, swallowing each step in a hush. My thoughts began to feel less like mine. I'd think of something, my mother's humming, a conversation with a teacher from high school, the way my brother's hair used to catch light, and a moment later I'd hear it in the air, soft, around me, like the forest was finishing my memories for me. And then I heard something new. Not a whisper, a song, distant, barely audible, a lullaby, familiar, not because I knew it, but because it carried recognition. Like something sung to me before I could speak. The trees bent closer, the path narrowed, and at the end of the bend, another figure appeared, sitting cross-legged, back turned, hair down, shoulders trembling. I stopped. They were humming the same melody, slow, careful, the way you might sing to someone asleep. I approached cautiously, each footstep like a question. The forest didn't stop me. 10 feet away, the figure froze, didn't look. Just said, without turning, "You're not ready yet." The voice was mine, not similar, mine. Lower, older, edges frayed by years in the cold. I felt my jaw tighten. "What does that mean?" He exhaled, turned, and I saw my own face, not mirrored, not reversed, weathered, eyes darker, not with malice, but with understanding. He looked at me like someone who had already tried to explain everything and now just pitied my need to ask. "You think this place traps you," he said. "But it doesn't. You stay because part of you wants to." I shook my head. "That's not true." He smiled, small, sad, "Then leave." I hesitated, took a step back, and the forest responded. The path behind me darkened, closed, roots coiled in, not violently, just final. I turned back to him. "You stayed," I said. He nodded. "We all do eventually, long enough, and the whispers stop sounding like strangers. They start sounding like truth." The forest pulsed around us. Not violently, not angry, just alive. I could hear my heartbeat in the needles, smell memory in the soil. The longer I stood there, the more I felt it, the shift, the soft invitation to forget, to stay. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But somewhere in me a small thread pulled tight, a voice, not the forest's, but mine, the real one. And it whispered, "Get up, keep walking, don't fall asleep in someone else's story." So I turned, and I ran. I didn't look back. Not at the figure sitting cross-legged in the dirt, not at the trees that bent to watch me pass, not at the path that might have been sealing shut behind me. I ran like I used to when I was a kid, reckless, fast, full of instinct, lungs tearing at the cold morning air like they were on fire. My pack slammed against my spine with every stride, branches clawing at my coat, but I didn't care. I needed movement, momentum, something to prove that I still had agency, that I wasn't just part of some story playing out without me. The forest blurred. Time unraveled. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes? Hours? A whole day? Eventually I fell. My foot caught on a root slick with moss, and I slammed shoulder first into the ground, my face scraping through pine needles and damp loam. The wind left my chest in one violent gust. I didn't get up right away. Instead, I just lay there, heart pounding, eyes open to a canopy that pulsed with light too soft to be sunlight. It shimmered between the branches like something liquid, something alive. Every inhale I took smelled like wet rock and old rain. The whispering had stopped, but not the pressure. The forest wasn't pushing anymore. It was waiting. I rolled onto my back, wincing. My shoulder throbbed where I hit the ground. Dirt coated my palms. My journal had spilled out beside me, pages open, fluttering like wings. I looked at the top page. A new entry. Not mine. Not yet. You'll come back. You always do. My throat tightened. I wanted to tear the page out, burn it, bury it, anything to sever the sense that this place knew my future better than I did. But I didn't. Instead, I closed the cover, slid it back into my pack, and I stood. Slowly, deliberately. I was done running. I wanted out. Not because I thought I'd beat the forest, not because I thought escape would mean freedom, but because I wanted to try. I wanted to choose, even if the choice was meaningless. So I turned toward the light, and I walked. No trail, no path, just uphill toward a brightness that pulsed through the trees like a heartbeat, too pale to be sun, but too steady to be a trick of the eye. My legs burned. My breath rasped, but the pressure around me lessened, like the forest wasn't angry about my decision, just curious. The trees grew farther apart, the canopy thinned, and finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I saw the sign. Wooden, faded, a cracked trail marker half swallowed by ivy, and behind it, a gravel lot, empty, silent, just like the day I arrived. For a long moment I didn't move. The shift back to reality, if that's what this was, hit me like altitude sickness. The silence out here was different, not dense, not alive, just empty. I stepped forward, my boots hit gravel, solid, real, no circle, no whispers, just wind, cold, indifferent. I staggered to my car, the same dust streaks on the windows, same gear piled in the back, same satellite beacon clipped to the dash, blinking steadily now as if nothing had happened. I opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and sat there, engine off, heart loud in the quiet. I didn't cry, didn't scream, just breathed and listened. But the forest behind me said nothing, no voice, no echo, just the distant hush of pine needles brushing against one another like closing thoughts. I stayed in the lot until the light changed, until evening painted the treetops gold and my hands stopped shaking. Then I started the car, rolled slowly out of the park. Mile by mile, the world crept back in. The shape of pavement, the white lines of the road, the dull buzz of reality pressing back into my chest. But something came with me. Not a curse, not a scar. Memory. That night in a cheap roadside motel, I opened the journal. Just once, to a fresh page. And I wrote, I left, but I still hear them, and sometimes I still answer. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and lay awake, listening to the hum of the highway through the walls. But in the gaps between the noise, in the silence that followed, I swear, from somewhere just outside the window, I heard the pines whisper my name. And this time I whispered back, I remember. I didn't grow up camping. My parents were the kind who locked the screen door even in a gated suburb. The closest we got to nature was walking the dog through a landscaped park with speakers in the hedges piping in bird sounds. But Annie had dirt under her fingernails from the day I met her. She'd grown up in Montana, ran barefoot down gravel roads, spent her childhood catching frogs in irrigation ditches. She was always trying to bring me back to what she called what matters. That's how I ended up at Crater Lake in a rented camper van with no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, and more pine needles than I'd seen in my entire life. It was supposed to be our compromise. After months of me glued to a laptop and her pacing the walls of our apartment, we agreed on 10 days in Oregon. Off-grid, just us, trees, and the deepest lake in America. We got there late, later than we'd planned. The sun had already sunk behind the ridge, turning the sky into this stretched bruise of purple and copper. Our reserved spot sat a few miles off the main rim road, tucked between sloping pines and volcanic boulders that looked like frozen shadows in the dim. The forest didn't feel menacing. Not yet. It felt indifferent, like we were too small to matter. We backed the van into place. Annie jumped out before the engine even cooled, breathing in like she was drinking it. "You smell that?" she said. "Cold pine, just before nightfall. My favorite." I nodded, tried to smile. The truth was, I felt a knot already forming in my chest. Maybe it was the altitude or how quiet it was, so quiet I could hear my own pulse or the dry rasp of needles under my boots. Annie didn't notice. She was already stringing up a lantern under the canopy, rummaging for the camping chairs. "You're doing it again," she said, looking over her shoulder. "What?" "Living in your head. You made it. You're here. The world's not going to burn if you stop thinking about work for 10 minutes. "I'm not thinking about work," I lied. "I'm just getting used to it." She didn't press. That's one of the things I loved about Annie. She didn't force me to be more than I was ready for. She just made room beside her. And that night, once the fire was going and the stars started peppering through the canopy, I felt a little of that knot loosen. We sat close, knees touching, passing a bottle of cheap red wine back and forth, talking about nothing. Then we saw the lantern. It wasn't ours. Ours was still hanging from the awning, casting warm light over the cooler and 2 folding chairs. This other one, it was a flicker. Distant, out past the trees, where the land sloped downward toward the lake. I wouldn't have noticed if Annie hadn't paused mid-sentence. "Hey," she said, pointing. "Look." It blinked once, then twice, moving slowly behind the trees. Not fast enough to be a hiker with a headlamp. And it was warm, more yellow than LED. Old-fashioned, like a kerosene lantern. "You think someone's night hiking?" I asked. "Out there?" she said. "No trail in that direction, and the rangers told us they were closing some areas because of snowmelt erosion." We watched it for a long time. It never came closer, just drifted laterally across the dark, like someone walking parallel to the ridge. Then it faded behind a copse of firs and didn't reappear. "Creepy," I muttered, trying to sound amused. But Annie leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "No footsteps," she said. "What?" "No sound. If someone's walking that close in this dry brush, we'd hear them. There's no wind tonight." We didn't talk much after that. Eventually, she said she was tired and went into the van. I stayed out a little longer, poking at the fire, staring out into the darkness where the lantern had vanished. It didn't come back. But I thought about it the whole night. Even after I crawled into bed beside Annie, I could feel that flicker somewhere behind my eyes, like a warning I couldn't understand. The next day was normal enough. Coffee in metal mugs, a short hike to the Watchman Overlook. Tourists with selfie sticks, the occasional distant hum of motorcycles echoing through the caldera. The lake looked like an eye, too still, too blue, like it was watching everything from the bottom of time. Annie loved it. She stood near the edge of the overlook with her arms wide, like she was trying to catch the sky. "I want to come back here every year," she said. "Make it a tradition. Just you, me, and the lake." I smiled, but part of me felt hollow. Something didn't sit right. I kept thinking about the lantern, about how it had moved without sound, without pattern, and how Annie had known instinctively that something was off. That night, it returned. Earlier this time. Around twilight, just after the last traces of sun had slipped from the tops of the trees. I'd been chopping kindling with a dull hatchet we brought, and Annie was sketching something in her notebook, crouched by the boulders that rimmed our site. "There," she said, not even looking up. I followed her gaze. Same flicker. Same distance. No sound. Just a steady yellow pulse like a heartbeat in the trees. "Let's go see it," Annie said, standing. "Wait, what?" I laughed, but it came out sharper than I meant. She was already pulling on her jacket. "It's not far. We could find whoever it is. Say hi, I'm curious." No one just wanders out there with an oil lamp, if that's even what it is. So we find out, she said, brushing dirt off her knees. Come on, what's the worst that happens? I don't know why I said yes. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, like I was the only thing keeping her from something she needed to understand. Maybe it was that part of me that still wanted to be different, more like her. Someone who ran barefoot down strange roads, unafraid of the dark. We didn't bring a flashlight, just my phone and her gut instinct. The flicker stayed ahead of us, moving just slow enough to keep us intrigued, but never letting us get closer. It was like it knew our pace, like it was adjusting to us. At one point, Annie whispered, "It's leading us." I wanted to stop, say no, turn around. But every time I opened my mouth, the air felt too heavy, like if I spoke, I'd shatter something fragile. The deeper we went, the more the forest changed. Not visually, but something under the bark, like the trees were watching. The static started in my ears, faint at first, like a radio left on in another room, then stronger, crackling through the silence. I looked at Annie, but she didn't seem to notice. She just kept walking toward the light. That was the last time things felt real. We must have walked 15, maybe 20 minutes, though it felt longer. The ground sloped unevenly, forcing us into a kind of cautious march, the pine needles thick underfoot and slick in spots. That strange electric fuzz still crawled in my ears, not loud, just present, like an itch deep in the auditory nerves. I asked Annie if she heard it, but she just shushed me, eyes locked ahead on the flickering glow. It moved like it was being carried, but there was no visible shape, no silhouette behind it. Just the lantern floating, always just far enough to keep us reaching. I stopped once, planting my heels, unsure why I hadn't already turned around. Annie kept going until she noticed I wasn't beside her. "You okay?" she asked, breath curling in the cold. "I don't know what we're doing out here," I said. "It's dark. We didn't mark the trail, and that thing, it doesn't feel right." Her face was unreadable in the half-light. "Don't you want to know what it is?" "No," I said. "I want to go back. We saw something weird, fine. Now let's not be the people who end up in those stories." For a long moment she didn't respond, just stood there, watching the light blink between the trees. Then she took a slow step toward me. "Okay," she said gently. "We'll go back." She took my hand, fingers cold but firm. We turned, and the light vanished behind us, instantly. Not faded, not walked out of view. Just gone, like it had never been there. The quiet came roaring back. That static in my head died all at once, replaced by the sheer density of silence. It pressed against my chest like altitude sickness. I suddenly realized how far we were from anything, from the van, from warmth, from help. And then the wind shifted. It moved through the trees like it had words in it. Not voices exactly, but cadence. The kind of rise and fall you only notice when you're listening for meaning. Like syllables buried in leaves. A rhythm to the way it pushed through the pine boughs. Annie froze. "You hear that?" she whispered. This time I didn't answer. The way back should have been easy. It never is, though. Trails never look the same in reverse, especially when there wasn't really a trail to begin with. We doubled back, turned around once, then again. The trees bled together into an indistinct wall of darkness. No moon, no stars. Just towering silhouettes and the smell of cold soil. And that wind. Always in motion, never enough to push the branches. Just enough to speak. I turned on my phone flashlight, and it made things worse somehow. The narrow cone of light made the shadows more real, gave shape to everything we couldn't see. The edges of branches looked like hands. Every crunch beneath our feet echoed too loudly. Annie said nothing, jaw tight, scanning the trees. I kept checking over my shoulder, sure I was going to see that lantern again. We came upon a downed tree I didn't recognize, thick, split at the root like it had been torn up from below. That's when I realized we were going in circles. "We're lost," I said, my voice sharp and brittle. "I think we're there," Annie said, pointing. Light, warm, steady. My chest surged, relief, almost painful. But as we started walking toward it, I slowed. Something was wrong. It was the same light, same hue, same floaty flicker. No source, no movement. It hadn't followed us. It had gotten ahead. Annie kept walking. I didn't. Stop, I said. Annie, wait. She turned, impatient. We're going the right way. It's our lantern. No, it's not. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Then something shifted in her face. Not fear, certainty, but the wrong kind. Too still, too absolute. I saw it come from that direction, she said. That's camp. I don't think it is. She didn't respond, just looked back toward the light and stepped forward. I don't know what happened next. I swear I tried to grab her. I swear I reached. But 1 second she was there, and the next she was swallowed by the dark. No scream, no footsteps, no crashing brush, just gone. I called for her until my throat cracked. I ran toward where I'd last seen her. Nothing. No path, no warmth, just trees and cold and the low hum of something that was no longer wind. Eventually, I found the van. Or maybe it found me. I never figured out how I got back, just stumbled out of the woods with bleeding palms and knees and saw the shape of it through the trees. The lights were off. The fire dead. The folding chairs still perfectly aligned like they'd been waiting. She wasn't there. The ranger station didn't open until 8 a.m., and I waited outside all night. When I tried to explain what had happened, my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I said she'd wandered off, that we'd lost the trail, that maybe she'd fallen. I left out the lantern, left out the way the wind had spoken. They sent out a team, search dogs, helicopters, volunteers. No trace. It's been 6 days, and last night, just before dawn, I saw the lantern again. This time it was closer. I didn't move when I saw it. I sat rigid in the driver's seat of the van, hands gripping the steering wheel, though the keys weren't even in the ignition. The forest beyond the windshield was a silhouette, dense, layered black against a paler gray sky. But there, between two trees no wider than my shoulders, a warm flicker pulsed once. Then again. It was Annie's height. That's the first thought that hit me. Exactly where her head would be if she were holding a lantern and walking back to camp. I couldn't breathe. You'd think I'd jump out, run toward it, scream her name. But I didn't. I couldn't. Every instinct, every molecule in my body screamed no. Not because I was afraid it wasn't her, but because I was afraid it was. I hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. Couldn't eat. I'd answered every ranger question with mechanical half-truths and polite nods. I told them she'd likely gone hiking early, maybe got turned around, that she'd grown up around woods like these, that she'd be fine. But I never believed any of it. I'd seen how she stepped into that light, how the forest took her like it had just been waiting. And now the lantern was back. I stared at it for so long, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But it flickered again, just once, like a blink. Then nothing. Just the trees and the growing pale of early morning. That's when the smell hit me. Faint. Damp. Like earth turned too fast with a shovel. Not rot, not decay, just disturbed soil. Fresh. Cold. I opened the door and stepped out barefoot. I didn't remember deciding to do it. The pine needles were wet. The fog was low. Everything felt damp and distant, like I was still inside a dream, but aware of every sensation too clearly. The light didn't come back that morning. But something else happened. Just after sunrise, while the sky was still half-colored in copper haze, I walked past the boulders behind our site and found Annie's notebook. Closed, dry. Resting on a flat rock like someone had placed it there deliberately. I opened it with shaking fingers. Her sketches were rough, always had been. Half-formed lines, rushed pencil work, but full of feeling. Usually landscapes, trees, bits of camp life. The last page was different. A figure, drawn over and over. Same pose. A tall man with wide shoulders, a long coat or cloak, holding a lantern at waist level. No face, just black where the eyes should be. The hands were too large. One sketch had the lantern held aloft, and the flame inside was shaped like an eye. On the bottom of the page, in tiny letters, I had to squint to see she'd written, "He walks the wrong direction. Backwards, always." I dropped the book. By the time the Rangers returned for the second sweep, I'd already packed. I told them I needed space, that I had family out east and couldn't stay here. They didn't argue. There wasn't anything else to do. I started driving south with no destination, just away, into smaller towns, then into nothing at all. Truck stops, motels, desert stretches so flat and endless the road began to feel like a dream. But the lantern followed. Not every night, not even every week, but just often enough. I'd be parked at a rest stop, headlights off, eyes closed, trying to sleep, and it would appear through the trees, never closer than 50 yards, never moving, just waiting. And the dreams, they started around week 3. I'd see Annie walking through the forest, her hands out in front of her like she was pushing through thick water. Her mouth would move, but no sound came out. Then she'd stop and tilt her head like she'd heard something behind her. That's when the static would start. Loud, violent, like a radio exploding in my ears. And in that noise, there was language, a message I could almost understand. The worst part was, I'd wake up still hearing it, even with my eyes open. One night, I drove for 10 hours straight just to try to outrun it. Didn't matter. Eventually, I turned back. Crater Lake wasn't on the map anymore, not the spot we'd camped. That's what shook me first. The coordinates I'd saved were wrong, suddenly leading to a blocked service road and a sign that said area closed indefinitely due to hazardous terrain. But I knew the way by memory now. I parked at the edge of the restricted sign and hiked in on foot, retracing our steps as best I could. Same ridges, same boulders. The trees looked identical, too identical, like a loop. I could feel the squeeze of the forest again, that narrowing pressure between my ribs. Then I saw it, the lantern, 30 feet away, and behind it, a shape. Not a man, not quite. It was tall but wrong, shoulders hunched, one arm too long. It stood in profile, then slowly turned, not like a person turns, but like it rotated on an axis that didn't match its frame. I saw the outline of the lantern, held low, flame steady, but it didn't light anything. No glow, no radius, just a center point of warmth that refused to touch the trees. Then it stepped backward, not stumbled, not turned, just cleanly backwards. My breath caught. It moved that way, unnaturally smooth, like someone had reversed a film reel. No noise. No footprints, just retreating into the trees as the wind whispered through the branches. And in the hush that followed, I swear I heard my name. But it wasn't a voice. It was a thought. Not yours anymore. I turned and ran. Didn't stop until I reached the van. Hands shaking, mouth dry, I vomited on the gravel before I could even start the engine. I don't know what I brought back with me. I don't know if it's me anymore. But every night now, even hundreds of miles away, the trees outside my window lean the wrong direction, backward, like they're being pulled by something just out of sight. And sometimes when I pass mirrors in dark rooms, I see the lantern flickering behind me. I started avoiding reflections. It wasn't conscious at first. I'd close the bathroom door while brushing my teeth, angle mirrors down in motels, keep the van's rear view tilted toward the ceiling, but it became a ritual, an act of protection. Because every time I did catch my own reflection, there was a flicker, always in the periphery, just over my shoulder. A pinpoint of warmth in an otherwise cold space. I told myself it wasn't real, that it was my brain, overworked, traumatized, seeing what it expected to see. The mind has ways of creating meaning in chaos, patterns in clouds, faces in wallpaper. But one night, in a gas station bathroom somewhere in Nevada, I made the mistake of looking too long. The flicker didn't disappear this time. It held, right behind me, just over my left shoulder. A lantern, pale gold flame. No reflection of the figure holding it, just the light. I turned fast, heart in my throat, expecting, God, I don't even know what, but there was nothing there. Just the humming flicker of a dying fluorescent bulb and the sour stink of bleach and rust. When I turned back to the mirror, the lantern was gone. But my own eyes, they didn't look like mine anymore. They looked calmer. And that terrified me because I hadn't felt calm in weeks. After that, the days began to blur. I stopped using my name at check-ins, avoided people, stayed away from trails, from wooded areas, from anything that reminded me of Oregon. But it didn't help. I'd see flashes of movement in the corners of parking lots, hear footsteps behind me when the world was still. The worst were the recordings. I'd wake up to find my phone had been activated sometime in the night. Always just audio, sometimes 10 seconds, sometimes 2 full minutes, and always the same thing. Breathing. Not mine. Too deep, too slow, and underneath it barely audible, a faint crackle. Like static on a record or fire licking damp wood. One file had something else. A voice. My voice. I don't remember saying anything, don't remember even being awake, but the timestamp matched the dead middle of the night. I listened to it a dozen times before deleting it, but I still remember the words. She followed him because she thought he knew the way out. But he only knows how to bring people in. I started mapping every place I'd seen the lantern since leaving Oregon. There wasn't a pattern, at least not geographically, but something else emerged. Each time it appeared, I was parked within 20 miles of water, a lake, a reservoir, a river. Didn't matter, as long as there was depth. That's when I started remembering something the ranger had said on our first day at Crater Lake, before Annie went missing. Just casual conversation, part of the welcome pamphlet spiel. He said, "No one's ever found the bottom. We know the depth, sure, but the water absorbs sound in strange ways. Sonar hits a wall of silence." I hadn't thought anything of it at the time, but now that phrase stuck with me. A wall of silence. That's what I heard in the forest. That moment when the static cut out, that dead pause when the air stopped existing. It wasn't just wind, it was an echo that never returned. I stopped driving eventually. My body couldn't take it. My mind couldn't either. I found a long-term campsite in Arizona, dry country, far from deep water, just a flat slab of desert rock and distant ridges. I parked the van in the most exposed spot I could find. Nothing could approach without being seen. Or so I thought. 3 nights ago, I woke to the sound of gravel shifting outside the van. Not footsteps, just one long drag, like someone was pulling something heavy in a straight line. I stayed still, breathing shallow. Hand curled around the small utility knife I kept by the bed. Then the sound stopped. The silence was thicker than air. And then, light. Not outside. Inside. It flickered against the cabinets, the steel of the sink, the white of my own knuckles. I looked toward the rear windows. Nothing. But the glow kept shifting, like someone was walking from one side of the van to the other, just behind me. And this time I felt it. Warmth. Actual warmth on my back. I turned, swinging the knife wildly, and found myself alone. No light, no shape, nothing disturbed, just the faintest smell of wet wood and sulfur. The next morning, there were footprints in the dust around the van. Barefoot, adult-sized, one set, and all facing toward the door, none facing away. I thought about leaving again, about driving east, trying to disappear into the noise of cities, but I think I understand something now. It doesn't matter where I go. I brought it with me. Or maybe I never left. I went back to Annie's sketches again this morning. I hadn't looked since Oregon. I kept them folded inside the glove box under expired registration forms. Her final page, that figure with the lantern, I saw something I had noticed before. In the margin, almost etched into the paper with print instead of ink, "He wears your shape when he's ready." I don't know what that means yet. But when I catch my reflection now, even in the briefest glance, I swear the flicker inside the lantern is stronger, like it's waiting, and I don't know whose eyes are looking back at me anymore. I started keeping the curtains shut, even in daylight. Something about open windows felt like an invitation. Not for people. For whatever this was. The way light filtered in made shadows do things they shouldn't, stretch too far, move too fast. The van used to feel safe. It was our little shell, a traveling home. But now every cabinet creak felt like breath. Every hum in the wiring felt like a whisper through bone. The air inside had turned, loaded, not with scent exactly, but with something thicker than oxygen, like it wasn't empty anymore. 2 nights ago, I decided to test something. I left my phone camera running while I slept, facing me. Low brightness, no flash. In the morning, I watched the footage. At 3:12 a.m., the screen shook once. A tiny shudder, then the picture blurred, like the lens had been pressed with a finger. Not fully covered, just enough to distort. And then something even worse. My face smiled. Not a twitch, not a muscle spasm, a full, slow grin. But I didn't move. My breathing never changed. Eyes closed the whole time. Then the smile faded, frame by frame. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. I don't remember dreaming, don't remember anything at all. But when I looked in the mirror that morning, I had a faint reddish bruise along my jawline, like fingers had pressed there. 4 on one side, a thumb on the other. I didn't film the next night. I couldn't. I'm afraid of what I'll find. But I know something new now. Whatever the Lantern Man is, it doesn't need the forest anymore. It's found its way into me. That night, I had a different kind of dream. Not a vision, more like a memory that didn't belong to me. I was walking along a lake's edge. The sky overhead was completely starless, blacker than black, and the lake didn't reflect. It swallowed light. I wasn't carrying a lantern. I was the lantern. Or maybe I was inside it. There was warmth on my chest, and I looked down to see a flame flickering just beneath my ribcage. Not burning me, not painful, just there, like it had always been. It pulsed every time I exhaled. Ahead, someone waited. Annie. She stood barefoot at the water's edge, arms limp at her sides, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I called out to her, but no sound came, not even the echo. She didn't turn. She stepped forward, into the lake, not walking onto the water, into it. As if the surface had peeled open, she sank without a ripple, like she belonged there, like she'd been called. And that's when I woke up. My mouth was filled with lake water, real water. I coughed it out onto the floor of the van, shivering, choking. It smelled like algae and rust and something colder than time. I hadn't parked near water. I checked before I fell asleep. No streams, no puddles, just high desert rock. But my shirt was soaked through, and there were wet footprints leading away from the van. Bare, narrow, Annie's size. They disappeared 20 feet out into dust that had no business holding moisture. I left that same morning, driving with no direction, just moving. Hours passed in silence. I couldn't put on music. Even the sound of my own voice started to feel foreign, like a recording of someone I used to be. Every thought now loops around a single phrase. He walks backwards. I've been replaying that over and over. What does it mean? Is he undoing something, reversing time, pulling people back? Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's just that he doesn't leave. He never turns his back because he's always watching, always waiting for you to face away first. That night in the motel just outside of New Mexico, I left every light on, slept with the TV humming static. Something about the white noise made it easier to pretend I was alone. But at 3:12 a.m., the same time as before, my phone lit up with a message. No sender, no number. Just 4 words, "You brought him back." I dropped the phone, left it on the motel dresser, and didn't touch it until morning. When I finally picked it up again, the message was gone. No record, no log, no trace in the system. But the timestamp was still there. 3:12 a.m., dead center of the night. Same as the footage, same as when the breathing starts. It's not coincidence. He's marking something. Last night, I finally opened the notebook again, the one Annie had been drawing in before she vanished. I hadn't dared flip to the back cover, but when I did, I found something I swear wasn't there before. Not a drawing this time. A sentence, scrawled in faint, graphite-smudged handwriting. Shaky. Hurried. You're not supposed to bring the lantern back to where there's no reflection. I don't know what that means. But I haven't seen my reflection in 4 days. Mirrors show nothing now. Not even the flicker. Just blank space where my face should be. And I think he's almost here. I left the mirror propped in the sink for 3 hours, kept the lights off, closed every curtain, just sat across from it in the dark, waiting. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some trick of the eye, some angle or shift that would snap me out of this descent, but the mirror stayed silent, still, and so did I. No reflection, just the black square of glass swallowing the faint ambient light from the moon. It's not just mirrors now, not just reflections. Surveillance cameras show nothing when I walk past. I checked in at a gas station store off I-80, stayed long enough to watch the live feed loop on a corner monitor. Customers came and went. The clerk scratched his beard. A couple teenagers loitered near the candy rack. But when I walked in, nothing. The door opened, the bell chimed, but no one showed up on the screen. I was invisible, erased, like something was redacting me from the world. The clerk looked at me strangely when I asked if their cameras were working. "Yeah," he said slowly. "You just walked in, didn't you?" He was polite, a little unnerved, probably just thought I was high. But as I turned to leave, I saw his eyes track something behind me. Not me, behind me. And he backed up a step, didn't say anything, just stepped behind the counter, like instinct told him distance mattered. That was 2 days ago. Since then, I've stopped looking for help. I've stopped trying to prove anything, because I think it's too late. I started to realize that this whole time, the story I was telling myself, that I brought something back, that I was the victim, wasn't entirely true. The deeper truth, the one that clings to me like the scent of wet ash, is simpler. I was never supposed to leave the forest. I've been trying to trace it back, where the shift happened, where reality peeled open and let something else in. It wasn't when we saw the lantern the first time, not even when Annie disappeared. It was when I turned away. That exact moment, the decision to step back, to retreat. I left her, and he saw it. The lantern man. I don't think he hunts in the traditional sense. He doesn't chase, doesn't grab or pull. He waits. He watches. He gives you a choice. Step toward the unknown or look away. And whatever you do, whichever path you choose, he takes the other. He becomes it. Annie stepped forward. I stepped back. He took us both, just in different directions. And now I see it for what it is. It's not just haunting, it's replacement. That's what Annie meant. He wears your shape when he's ready. He doesn't kill, he mirrors, he becomes. Last night, parked in an abandoned rest area in the middle of Utah, I saw something new. I woke at 3:12 again, of course, and the lantern was there. But this time, it wasn't outside, it was inside the van. Not flickering, not moving, just sitting in the center of the floor between the seats. Cold light, no flame, just an orb of static humming in the glass. I didn't touch it, didn't even breathe. Then I noticed the reflection in the windshield. Not mine, Annie's. Not her body, her face. Calm, blurred, like water was running over it. She stood outside the van just beyond the glass, eyes closed, asleep on her feet, and something moved behind her. Tall, crooked, like someone standing wrong on purpose. A silhouette with shoulders that reached too high and a neck that turned just slightly too far. It stepped backward behind her, into the forest, and she followed. I blinked. They were gone. The lantern was gone. But when I leaned forward, I saw what they left behind. A handprint pressed into the inside of the windshield. Small, familiar, 4 fingers, and a thumb on the wrong side. I haven't driven since. I've just been sitting here, writing this down, trying to put it in some order, like if I organize it, I can undo it. But deep down, I know there's nothing left to undo. Because this morning, when I stepped out into the sun for the first time in days, I had no shadow, none. The light passed right through me, and when I looked into the reflection on the side of the van, I saw the lantern, but no one holding it, just the glow, floating there, waiting. The moment you realize you're not casting a shadow, you stop trusting the world. You start testing everything. I waved my hand in front of the van's windows. Nothing. Stepped into the sunlight again, tilted my head, leaned forward, stretched out my arms. The gravel reflected heat. The metal burned to the touch, but no shape stretched across the ground, like the sun had forgotten me, or something else had taken my place in its light. It wasn't just about not being seen, it was about no longer being recorded. No mark, no trace. I drove again, didn't know where, just picked a direction and kept the sun on my right, so I knew I was headed south. But it didn't matter. Every road felt the same, signs blurred into each other. I'd passed the same empty rest stop twice without ever turning around. Once, I drove 4 straight hours through the desert and ended up right back at a gas station I swore I'd already passed. Each time, the lantern appeared a little closer. It never moved, but it grew. By proximity, by familiarity. It was in the passenger seat reflection one morning, just the edge of it. A glow in the van's side mirror that shouldn't have been there, not with the sky still blue. No flame should flicker at midday, but there it was, steady, golden, hovering just behind my shoulder, and something new began happening. I started hearing footsteps that matched mine. Not behind, not beside, underneath, like someone walking in sync with me beneath the floorboards of wherever I stood. It started on concrete, then gravel, then even the hollow wood of a cheap motel room. And always, always at 3:12 a.m., they'd stop, like whoever or whatever was mirroring me had paused to listen. That's when the whispering would begin. It wasn't wind, it wasn't static, it was language. But it wasn't spoken out loud, it came from inside. Not in my mind exactly, deeper, like the bones of my skull were vibrating to syllables carved from stone. It would say things like, "You are the place where the flame waits," or "Each step forward echoes backward," or "She walked first, now you carry her last." I stopped sleeping after that, stayed awake as long as I could. Every time I did drift off, I woke gasping, reaching for someone who wasn't there, sometimes with the taste of ash in my mouth. And then 2 nights ago, I found another sketchbook. It was sitting on the picnic table of an empty site, maybe 50 yards from where I'd parked for the night. Just out in the open. Windless night. No sign of another camper. Same type of notebook Annie used. Same torn spine, same graphite pressure. I flipped through it with trembling hands. Pages and pages of the same figure. The Lantern Man. But he looked different now. He wasn't holding the lantern anymore. He was made of it. The flame was his chest. The ribs curled around it like a cage, and on one page I saw a figure, small, curled up, inside the lantern, drawn with frantic, desperate lines, scratches surrounding it like the person had been clawing to get out. At the bottom, in Annie's unmistakable handwriting, "If you follow the light, you live in it forever." And below that, something even stranger. In handwriting that wasn't hers, "If you turn away, it follows you." I slammed the book shut. I wanted to throw it, burn it, crush it, but I couldn't. I shoved it under the driver's seat and drove without stopping for 12 straight hours, until my eyes stung and my wrists cramped from holding the wheel. And still, he's catching up. I think that's the worst part of it. He doesn't chase. He just waits. Every time I stop, every time I blink too long or let my mind drift, he gains ground. Because the real trick of it is, he doesn't want to catch you. Not yet. He wants to become you. Piece by piece. I can feel it happening. My skin doesn't respond to heat the same way. The tips of my fingers go numb for hours at a time. I looked at a photo of myself and Annie last night, the last one we took before the trip, and I barely recognized the man beside her, not because of the face. The eyes. They were lit, warm, present, not like mine now. Now, they're glass, still, watching. Like the flame is already inside. That's when I realized the Lantern Man doesn't take you in the woods. He waits until you come back. He waits until you think you're safe or sane or real again. Then he starts to replace you. Not in one moment, not all at once. Gradually, so you forget what was ever yours. And when he's finished, you carry the lantern for the next one. I haven't spoken aloud in 3 days. It's not fear exactly. It's suspicion, paranoia, a quiet certainty that if I hear my voice now, it won't be mine. Or it will, but too slow, too hollow, as if something's already speaking through me and I just haven't noticed yet. I've started avoiding people entirely. Gas stations, diners, even ranger check-ins. I sleep in the van during the day, drive at night, back roads, unpaved shoulders, places without names. I passed a faded trail sign outside of Flagstaff a day ago, but it was unreadable, scratched out like something didn't want it remembered. I didn't stop. The stars looked wrong that night, off balance, scattered unevenly. I know that sounds crazy, but I've been watching the sky closely these past few weeks, like it might offer some kind of answer. But that night I realized it wasn't the stars that had shifted. It was me. The horizon moved around me now, like the world was trying to shake me off. And then came the voice. Not a whisper this time, not buried in static or wind. This was clear from the back of the van. A voice I hadn't heard in almost a month. Annie's. She said my name. Once. Softly. Like she was waking me up from a nap, like nothing had happened, like we hadn't torn the fabric of whatever kept us safe from things like him. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. because I knew somehow in the bones of me that if I looked, I'd see her face, but it wouldn't be hers. It would be wearing her smile, her eyes, but it would be him, the Lantern Man. Or worse, me, what he's been becoming. There's a moment in sleep right before you fall where your body jerks awake, like it senses something it can't explain. That's what my life has become, an endless falling jerk, a suspended twitch between worlds, between light and reflection, between who I was and what I'm becoming. I looked in the rearview mirror once yesterday, not to check the road, to check the back seat. It was empty, but not blank. There was weight there, like the cushion was occupied by something that didn't need to be seen. I reached back slowly and touched the fabric, warm, not sun-warmed, breath-warmed. That's when I heard the second voice, mine. It said calmly, "You should look forward now." Not as a warning, as a command. I dropped my hand, turned my eyes back to the road. But I didn't remember what road I was on anymore. The GPS had shut itself off. My phone had powered down at 3:12 a.m. sharp. I hadn't touched it. It hasn't powered back on since. The next morning, I parked in a narrow canyon, high walls, no signal, no people for miles. I thought I could trap it, contain whatever was happening, but when I stepped outside, I heard footsteps up above me, walking backward, heavier than mine, echoing down through the rocks like someone was pacing a loop carved into the stone. And then I heard breathing. My own, not through my chest, but around me, like it was being played through a speaker, slightly offbeat, a split-second delay, as though I was following myself by half a second. That's when I knew. He's done replacing me. Now I'm the echo. I walk behind and he walks forward. In my shape, wearing my shadow. And there's one more thing. Something I haven't told anyone because there's no one left to tell, but it's been clawing at the back of my mind for days now. I remember seeing the lantern once before Crater Lake. Years ago. I was maybe 10, visiting an uncle's cabin in Idaho. Couldn't sleep. Looked out the window late one night and saw a flicker down near the tree line, a soft, pulsing glow. I didn't think anything of it then. Just a hiker, I assumed, or someone with an old gas lamp. But the next morning, my cousin was gone. They said he'd run away. But I remember something else. I remember waking up to wet footprints in the hallway. Bare. Small. No one ever found him. And now I wonder if I've been marked ever since. If the Lantern Man didn't find me at Crater Lake. If he was waiting. Because now, every night when the lantern appears, when the light flickers outside my van or in the reflections I can no longer cast, I don't feel fear anymore. I feel recognition, like I'm returning to something I already was. And tonight, I don't think I'll run. I'm tired. He's already wearing me anyway. Might as well meet myself face to face. I left the van unlocked last night. It wasn't an accident. I didn't even bring the keys inside. Just left them dangling in the ignition, door half cracked as if I were stepping away for a second, not camping alone in the dead middle of nowhere. I think I needed to know, needed to prove it to myself, that I wasn't coming back. I didn't sleep. Not really. But I lay there with my eyes closed, arms stiff at my sides, heart barely ticking. Just waiting. Not for a sound, but for a presence, like the way you feel someone stare at you in the dark, the electric gravity of it. And sometime after midnight, I heard the click of the door unlatching the rest of the way, then nothing, no footsteps, no wind, just wait. Wait. The kind of weight you feel on your chest when you dream you're drowning, the kind of weight you don't wake up from, but I did wake up, if you can call it that. Somewhere near dawn, I opened my eyes and found the van exactly how I'd left it, only now the keys were gone, and in their place, sitting gently on the dashboard, was the lantern, unlit, cool to the touch, and underneath it, a piece of torn notebook paper with one word written in pencil, trade. I stared at it for what must have been an hour. He wanted a trade. But for what? Me for Annie? Me for whoever I used to be? Me for whoever he's already taken? I picked up the lantern. Held it in both hands. It was heavier than I expected, solid, almost fused, like the metal had melted and frozen again. No wick, no fuel, just glass. And deep inside, barely visible through the grime and scratches, was the soft outline of a face, pressed against the inside, mouth open, screaming. Annie's, not moving, just imprinted like smoke caught in amber. I dropped it, didn't shatter, didn't even crack, just landed in the dirt with a hollow thud like it belonged there. And for a long moment, I forgot where I was, who I was. If I was still the one standing here, or if I was already in the glass, watching some other version of me carry my body around, I ran, on foot, into the trees, barely thinking. Bark scraped my arms, branches clawed at my shirt. The sun was still low, but the air felt too warm, the ground soft and damp like it had just rained, except it hadn't. Not a drop. And through the canopy, I caught glimpses of light, not sunlight. The lantern, flickering ahead of me, not moving, still, but always ahead, like it knew where I was running, like it had already been there. And then I reached the clearing, the one I didn't remember passing on the way in, and there she was, Annie. Not distorted, not aged, not broken, just sitting on the stump, exactly like that last sketch she'd drawn, the one in the fog. Only now the fog was gone. She turned when I stepped into the clearing, tilted her head, smiled, but she didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't move, just held out her hand, open, waiting. And in that moment, something inside me split, like I'd stepped out of my own skin. And suddenly I could see the whole thing, the loop, the path, the trap. It was never about scaring us away. It was about drawing us in, feeding us versions of ourselves, reflections, echoes, until we couldn't tell which was real, until we asked to trade places just to stop the noise. The Lantern Man didn't steal people. He waited for them to give themselves up, willingly. So I did the one thing I hadn't done since this started. I said her name, not quietly, not mournfully. I called it, Annie. And her eyes twitched, just barely. But enough. The clearing shimmered, the air folded, and for one blink, less than a second, I saw all of them. Dozens, hundreds, figures holding lanterns, standing behind trees, emerging from the bark itself, some with my face, some with hers, some with no face at all, just hollows where people used to be. And in that single blink, they stepped back, retreated into the shadows, and Annie breathed, collapsed forward into my arms, sobbing, coughing, real, and the lanterns, every last one of them, went out. All at once, not a hiss, not a pop, just silence, like a power had been cut, like something gave up, or maybe, just maybe, let go. We didn't speak for hours. I carried Annie back to the van in silence. Her body was real, solid, warm, too heavy to be a memory or a dream. Her hair smelled like pine smoke. Her skin had tiny scrapes across the forearms like she'd been crawling. She held on to me with both hands, and even as the sky brightened, she never looked away from me. Not once. Like if she blinked, she'd wake up back in that clearing. Back with them. I didn't ask her what happened. I didn't need to. The details don't matter anymore. Not the how, not the why, not even the when. What matters is this. She got out. Somehow. Some part of her had survived, trapped in that in-between place where memory gets twisted and light doesn't behave the way it should. But she heard me. She remembered my voice, not the reflection, not the mimic. Me. And that means there's still something they can't take. Not all the way. Not yet. When we reached the van, the keys were back on the dash. No note, no lantern, just the keys. I drove south, no plan, no maps. Just the road and the heat of her fingers curled into my sleeve. She didn't let go until well past noon. She sleeps a lot now, long stretches, dreamless. When she wakes, she stares at the horizon like she's checking it for holes, like she knows something could rip through at any moment and take her back. Sometimes I do too, because the truth is, I don't know if we made it out. Not completely. I keep seeing things on the side of the road, lanterns mostly, not lit, but hanging from trees that shouldn't be there, or resting on fence posts that vanish the moment I slow down. I try to tell myself they're memory, ghost echoes, but Annie sees them too. We never say it aloud, but I know we're being watched. Still. Like we passed the test, but failed the final question. Or maybe we're part of the next lure. Maybe we're the new flicker in the forest now, waiting for someone else to follow the light. Because here's the part I haven't told you. The part that makes my skin cold, even in the desert heat. The other day, I caught our reflection in the side mirror, just for a second. And in that second, I wasn't in the driver's seat. I was in the passenger's, just staring back at myself, expressionless, waiting. I nearly swerved into a ditch. Annie grabbed the wheel, didn't scream, didn't flinch, just steadied us and kept driving like she'd seen it too. Maybe she had. Maybe that's the price for returning. The trade we never agreed to but made anyway. There's something else too. At night, when we pull off to sleep, we don't stay long, 3 hours at most, enough for a nap, enough to reset. Then we move again, because even with the doors locked and windows covered, the air turns tight if we stay too long, like we're being pulled at. And Annie, she whispers in her sleep, not words, names. I recognize some of them. My cousins, a girl from high school who went missing during a camping trip in 2013, a ranger we met back in Zion who'd been transferred suddenly, names she never should have known, but I don't wake her. Because I think those names are keeping her grounded, anchoring her to the people who didn't make it out, and maybe keeping her from joining them. Here's the final truth, the one I can't say aloud. I don't think we can stop him. The Lantern Man isn't a person, not even a spirit. He's something older, something that lives in the repetition, in the echoes, in the spaces we don't look directly at, in the fear that whispers just before we fall asleep, or the hesitation before we call someone's name in the dark. He waits in the places we forget. And now I know what he wants. Not just the lost, not just the scared, but the ones who hesitate, the ones who doubt their own instincts, the ones who see the flicker and still step forward. He doesn't take you. He waits for you to give yourself away. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe that's what the desert's been trying to say all along. The echo doesn't always follow you. Sometimes it's waiting ahead. Annie's beside me now, awake, watching the same road I am. We don't talk, we don't smile, but every so often she reaches over and taps the dashboard twice, bro, like she's checking to make sure it's still solid, still here, and I tap back, because that's how we survive now, not by running, not by hiding, but by remembering, by making noise, by leaving our own echoes behind. So when the light flickers again, and it will, we'll know exactly where not to follow, and maybe, just maybe, someone else will too. I used to think I understood the mountain. I spent half my life rescuing people off its slopes, searching for hikers who underestimated weather, climbers who lost their nerve, and campers who vanished in snowstorms that came out of nowhere. You get to know a place that way. You learn its rhythms, its tricks, its moods, but what no one ever tells you is that the mountain doesn't owe you truth. Just because you've survived it doesn't mean you've seen all of it. And some parts of Rainier, some parts they never wanted to be found. That's why I came back. I was 63, retired for 3 years, living quiet in Olympia, mornings in the garden, afternoons walking the dog along Capitol Lake. But something had started clawing at me in my sleep. Not memories, not nightmares. Just pressure. A feeling like something was watching from beneath the roots of my life. No matter how quiet things got, I could still hear it. A low hum, like wind moaning through crevasses that shouldn't be there. I told myself I just missed the air, the altitude, the way the sky opens up over Rainier's summit, that I missed the crackle of campfire smoke and the sound of my boots crushing frost in the early morning. So I loaded up my old Volkswagen Westphalia, my girl, Alice, who'd carried me through decades of trailheads and backwoods bivouacs, and I drove east on 706 until the pine trees thickened and the mountain came into view like a ghost I hadn't made peace with. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my daughter, not my old partner Cal from the rescue team. They would have told me not to go alone, would have said I had nothing left to prove. But that's the thing, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted quiet. I wanted to listen. I wanted to see if the mountains still remembered me. I parked at a primitive campsite just past Ohanapekosh, where the road narrows and the glacier water runs too cold to touch for more than a few seconds. No hookups, no cell service, Just me, Alice, and the old growth standing sentinel on all sides. It smelled like damp moss and volcanic ash, the kind of deep, ancient scent that makes you feel like an intruder, even when you're trying to be reverent. I arrived late afternoon, set up the pop top, and ate a sandwich in the fading gold light. There was a strange silence to the place, no birdsong, no squirrels scurrying, just the wind occasionally shaking the upper branches and the distant sound of meltwater slapping over stone. That night, the ground moved. Not much, just a subtle lurch, like the earth had hiccuped. Alice creaked slightly on her shocks, and I sat upright in my sleeping bag, listening. I knew the mountain's sounds. I knew the difference between tremors and imagination. This wasn't seismic, it was localized, close, like something shifting directly beneath the van. I held my breath. My hand instinctively reached for the flashlight tucked into the mesh pocket above the sliding door. The van was quiet, but the silence outside had changed. There was a thickness to it, as if the woods were listening too. Eventually I drifted back into a light, uneasy sleep. The next morning I walked a few yards beyond the fire ring to take a leak and noticed something odd, a patch of earth that looked wrong. Not just sunken, but sunken evenly. Circular, about the width of a small manhole cover. I crouched beside it. The soil was cracked slightly at the edges, dark and crumbly. I prodded it gently with a stick and watched the surface flex like there was nothing solid beneath it. Not stone, not roots, just air. I leaned in and listened. Nothing, just the pulse in my ears. I'd seen sinkholes before. The mountain was full of them. Glacial melt and lava tubes made the ground a living, breathing thing. But something about this spot gave me a cold, quiet shiver that started at the base of my neck and slid down between my shoulder blades. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was hesitation. A feeling that I wasn't supposed to touch it, that if I opened it, something would look back. I marked the spot with a circle of pine cones and went about my day. Hiked out to the nearby creek, filtered some water, made coffee with my old steel percolator. But my eyes kept drifting back toward the woods, toward the circle I'd found. I didn't even tell myself I'd go check it again. I just kept listening. And the thing is, the longer I stayed, the more I realized that the silence wasn't real. Not total, anyway. It was hiding something. Late afternoon, I saw the second one. Farther down the trail, closer to the tree line. This one was bigger, maybe 3 feet across, and fresher. The pine needles around it were sucked downward, as if pulled from below. A slight breeze kicked up as I knelt beside it, and I swear to God I heard something exhale. I froze, looked around. Not a soul. The wind died instantly, like someone had closed a door behind it. I took a photo with my phone, even though I knew it wouldn't capture what I felt. I needed proof. Evidence. A record. And as I stared at that photo, zooming in, looking for detail, I realized something I hadn't noticed at first. The pine cones around the edges had teeth marks. Not squirrel, not deer, and not weathered over time. Fresh. That night, I parked Alice in a slightly different position, tires on firmer ground, flashlight and flare within arm's reach. I didn't sleep, just lay there, staring at the ceiling of the pop-top, listening to the creaks and pops of the forest settling. And somewhere around 3:30 a.m., I heard the sound again. Low, wet, like something breathing through stone. It didn't come from outside, it came from beneath me. At first, I thought it was a trick of my own breath. That half-dream state where your mind invents sounds to fill the silence. But the rhythm was wrong. Too slow. Too deep. My lungs couldn't make that sound, and worse, my breath didn't match it. Whatever was under me, it was breathing at its own pace. I held still, not frozen from fear, but listening. Really listening. 30 years on rescue teams teaches you how to read your surroundings, not just sights and sounds, but presence, vibe, the energy of a place. And right then, lying in my sleeping bag with a thin layer of fiberglass between me and the earth, the air inside Alice felt too tight, compressed, like something beneath the van was drawing the atmosphere into itself and deciding what to do with it. I whispered my own name, quiet. A test. Nothing responded. But the sound stopped. I waited, hand resting on the aluminum mag light beside my pillow. Then I heard something shift, just a subtle, slow scrape like soil being displaced. No big snap, no dramatic tremor, just movement. Intentional. Slow, like it knew I was listening, like it wanted me to know. That's when I made my first mistake. I opened the van door and stepped out barefoot into the cold. The ground was damp. The moonlight glowed silver through the trees, catching on dew and turning every pine needle into a sliver of glass. I could hear the creek down the hill, wind in the upper boughs, but closer, in that immediate circle of forest where sound doesn't travel far, I heard only silence, and then a soft crack. I turned. The first sinkhole had opened wider. The pine cones I'd placed were gone, swallowed or scattered, I couldn't tell which. The hole had grown by at least a foot, and now I could see inside. Not deep, maybe 3 feet down, but it didn't taper off into darkness the way a normal sinkhole would. It ended flat, cut clean, and at the bottom, God help me, there were lines, grooves like teeth marks or tool tracks etched in spirals across the surface. No animals had made this, no erosion. It looked manufactured, carved, and there was a smell, something warm and sour like decaying meat left in a hot tent. But not just rot, it had a sweetness to it, the kind that clings to your throat and makes you swallow hard. That's when the second mistake came. I leaned closer. Something breathed on me. Not wind, not my imagination. Warm, wet, a gust directly upward from the pit that carried with it a noise I can't explain. Not a growl, not a word, but something, shaped, something that passed through me like a whisper I almost understood. I stumbled back and sat hard on the cold earth. My foot landed in something soft. When I looked down, I saw another hole, smaller, fresh. The ground was riddled with them. Not random, patterned, a ring, like the forest floor had been perforated. And I was sitting in the middle. I bolted upright and ran barefoot back to the van, slammed the sliding door shut and locked it, even though I knew locks meant nothing to something that could move through the earth like that. I climbed back into the pop top and sat with my flashlight pointed at the center seam, gripping the handle like it was a lifeline. I stayed like that until dawn. The next morning, the holes were gone, not filled in, gone. No disturbed soil, no rings, just pine needles and moss, untouched, undisturbed, like nothing had ever happened. I paced the site 3 times, checking every mark, every root. Nothing. Even the smell was gone. But I knew what I'd seen. My knees ached from hitting the ground. My palms were scraped raw, and I still had dirt on my toes. I brewed coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and tried to talk myself out of it. Told myself it was a night terror, sleepwalking, a moment of disorientation triggered by being alone too long in familiar wilderness. But even as I said it out loud, I didn't believe it. I'd lived on this mountain, slept in worse, heard storms that peeled bark off trees and kept my mind sharp enough to navigate in pitch dark. I knew the difference between dreams and warning signs. And something was warning me. Still, I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to prove it wasn't real. Maybe the old rescuer in me thought I could fix something, understand it. But I stayed. I hiked 5 miles out to a ranger's post mid-afternoon, hoping to find someone to talk to. Maybe ask if they'd seen anything strange. The station was locked. A note on the door read, "Notice. Station closed until further assessment of ground stability. Contact base by radio." No date, no explanation. The radio inside was off. I circled around back, thinking maybe I'd find a groundskeeper or at least see if someone left a trail vehicle. But what I found was worse. A trail camera, snapped off its post. The lens cracked and casing chewed like something had tried to eat it. No prints, no fur, just more of those same circular indentations in the ground around the base. Not full holes this time, just markings, a suggestion of a mouth. I backed away slowly and walked the entire 5 miles back without stopping once. When I returned to Alice, there were new footprints around the van. Not boots, not animal, bare feet, deep, like someone or something had stood at each door and just waited. They weren't my prints. I walked the site carefully, trying to rule out everything rational. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking again. Maybe someone else had camped nearby and just got curious. But the tracks didn't match my size. I wear a 10 and a half. These were longer, narrower, and the toes, they weren't human. Not exactly. The front digits were too long, almost finger-like, and there were no heel marks. Whatever left them had walked differently, balanced forward, deliberate. I stood there for a long time, staring at the impressions in the pine needles, waiting for some piece of logic to rescue me. But it didn't come. The air was still and cold and wrong. It was the kind of cold that crept inward even with the sun out, a chill that ignored your jacket and curled behind your ribs like it knew you. I got in the van, locked every door, and drove. Didn't matter where. I just needed to be somewhere else. I figured maybe Cougar Rock, closer to other campers, somewhere with noise. But as I followed the winding road deeper into the forest, a dense fog started to roll in. Fast. Too fast. I hadn't seen fog like that since the COTS search back in '94, and that one had swallowed an entire rescue team's radios for 8 hours. This was worse. It wasn't mist. It was thick, pale gray with a greenish tinge, like glacial silt suspended in the air. I slowed down, flipped on the headlights, and realized with a sick jolt that I couldn't see the edge of the road anymore. Just a wall of vapor pressing in on all sides. I kept driving anyway. A quarter mile. Half. The van's engine sounded strange, muffled like we were underwater. Then the road ended. No sign, no fork, just gone. Gravel faded into moss and then trees. It didn't make sense. I knew this route. There was no sudden stop like this. And yet, here it was, like the land had changed behind my back. I threw the van into reverse and turned the wheel. Tried to back out, but the fog was thicker behind me. I stopped the van, heart thudding in my throat. I was sweating even though it was 40 degrees outside. The dashboard flickered. Then the radio kicked on by itself, full volume, just static, white noise. But underneath it, faint and warbling, I could have sworn I heard my name. Whispered. I killed the ignition. The static kept going. That's when I really knew, that this wasn't just geology. It wasn't weather. It wasn't time playing tricks on a lonely old man. The mountain was alive, not metaphorically, not poetically. Something ancient lived beneath it, and it had noticed me. I left the van running and stepped outside. The fog clung to my arms like cobwebs, thick and moist and whispering, though there was no wind. The woods were silent. I could barely see the trees, and then ahead of me I saw movement, not big, not aggressive, just motion. A slight parting of the fog about 50 yards ahead, like something brushing through the underbrush, a shape too tall to be human and too smooth to be bare. It paused. I froze. The shape turned. I could feel it, not see, but feel it turn toward me. That's when I heard the sound again. Not breath, not words, chewing, wet, labored, like meat being pulled from bone or roots being sucked from wet soil. I couldn't move. Every part of my nervous system screamed at me to run, but my legs refused. Not out of fear, but reverence. Like I'd walked into the presence of something holy in the worst possible way. And then the sound stopped. The shape vanished. The fog around me shifted again, this time behind me. I turned fast, stumbling toward the van. And that's when I saw the hole, right in front of the Volkswagen, much bigger now. A perfect circle in the gravel road, 5 feet across, edges crisp like something had punched upward through the earth in a slow spiral. There was no dirt pile, no signs of collapse, just a black open mouth gaping at me from below the tires. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. Then something rose from it. Not fully, just a suggestion, like the top of something immense lifting an inch, tasting the air. I saw the edge of a shape, a curve of black glassy skin glistening with moisture. Not rock, not flesh. It didn't belong here, didn't belong anywhere. I turned and ran, didn't stop until I hit the tree line and collapsed behind a fallen log, gasping, hands raw from catching limbs on the way down. The forest didn't move. The fog hung back, pulsing softly like lungs. I didn't sleep that night, just lay under a space blanket, staring into the dark, listening for movement. The chewing came and went, always faint, always wet. I knew it wasn't close, but I also knew it could be. Whenever it wanted. Whatever was under the mountain, it was waking up. And I'd been the one to knock. When dawn came, I didn't move. I just lay there behind that log, half covered in needles and frost, waiting for the light to burn away the fog or the sound or the thing beneath it. I listened to the morning like it might give me permission to exist again. And for a while, nothing happened. The chewing stopped. The whispers in the mist faded. But the mountain hadn't let go of me. Not really. I could feel it beneath the soil, in the trees, in the heavy silence around every limb. It wasn't just that the forest had quieted. It had turned inward. Like it had secrets now, like it was complicit. When I finally stood, my knees cracked loud in the cold air. I felt older than I had in years. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the walking stick I'd broken from a dead cedar branch the night before. I made my way back toward the road, or where I remembered it being. Alice was gone. No tire tracks, no shattered glass, just a ring in the dirt where her weight had once pressed down, an impression in the moss, like she'd been lifted or swallowed. I stood there and stared at the empty clearing, heart hammering, mouth dry. That van had been my life, my one constant companion through 3 decades of rescue calls, base camp nights, trail runs, all of it. And now it was gone. Erased, like it had never existed at all. The sick realization crept in slowly. I wasn't leaving the mountain, not unless I walked out. And even then, I didn't know which direction still led to the world I came from. I picked a heading southwest based on the slope of the terrain and started walking. No GPS, no phone, just instinct and old topography maps burned into the back of my skull. I pushed through thick pine groves and talus fields, the kind of ground that tests your ankles and your nerves. I was halfway across a clearing of deadfall when I smelled it again, that same sick, sweet stench. Worse this time. Stronger. I gagged. It hit the back of my throat and made my eyes water. I dropped to a knee, trying not to vomit, and that's when I saw it, another hole, wider than the last. But this one wasn't empty. At the bottom, lying in a puddle of slick black mud, was something pale, something soft. For a moment, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer that had fallen in. But the longer I looked, the more I saw the shape of a shoulder, fingers, a human form, face down, half sunken. I couldn't move. Everything in me screamed to back away. But that rescue instinct, that damn lifelong wiring, pushed me forward. I dropped to my stomach, reached into the pit with one hand, and grabbed the figure by the arm. Cold, softer than it should have been, like the tissue was breaking down. And then the arm moved, not from me pulling. It jerked on its own. I screamed and scrambled back, slipping in the mud. The figure rolled over slowly, like a corpse caught in slow current. Its face surfaced. It was mine. Not exactly, but close enough. Same jawline, same crooked nose, same faint scar over the right eyebrow from a climbing fall in '89. Except this face was bloated. The eyes were open, black and glassy. The lips parted slightly, and a thin stream of soil dribbled out. I ran. Didn't look back. Didn't check for trails or terrain. Just tore through the undergrowth until my legs buckled. And even then, I crawled. My knees scraped raw, my palms full of splinters. I didn't stop until I hit a stone wall of glacial moraine and collapsed behind it, heart threatening to tear itself out of my chest. I lay there for what felt like hours, and that's when the whispering came again. Not from below. From inside the rocks. It wasn't words, not at first, just suggestion. Images in my mind that weren't mine, ice shifting, mouths opening, bones sinking. I saw people, hikers, rangers, children, pulled into the earth by things with too many joints and no eyes. I saw sinkholes that never closed, mouths that had learned to mimic human voices. Then I heard mine, my own voice, calling my name. I stood, pressed my back to the cold stone, and finally understood what had been happening. The thing beneath the mountain, it didn't hunt like an animal. It didn't lunge. It didn't roar. It learned. It mimicked. It waited. And it wanted more than flesh. It wanted identity, memory. It wanted to consume what made people them. That's why the holes were so precise. They weren't collapse points. They were entries. Mouths, tasting, breathing, swallowing. It didn't just want me to fall in. It wanted me to step in willingly. That's what finally broke me. Not the sinkholes, not the thing I'd seen in the fog, not even the corpse with my face. It was the realization that the mountain didn't want to kill me. It wanted me to give myself to it, to kneel, to enter, to be devoured willingly. That kind of hunger, it doesn't come from nature. Nature kills without hate, without purpose. Avalanches, earthquakes, wolves, they don't need your soul. But this thing, it watched, it waited, it tested, and then it made itself familiar. That's why the corpse looked like me, why the voice sounded like mine. It wasn't trying to lure me blindly, it was showing me who I would become, what I would be after I gave in, and I almost did. For the next day, maybe two, I wandered. Not just through the woods, but through some broken corner of my own mind. I couldn't trust my compass. The sun never felt like it was in the right place. Every stream I followed circled back. My footsteps didn't always make sound. At some point, I came across a rusted trail sign buried in the brush. The metal was bent like something had grabbed it from the top and pulled. It read, Glacier Basin Trail, 3.2 mutses. But someone had scratched a warning into the wood beneath it. The ice doesn't forget. I stared at those words for a long time. They didn't make sense, not in any logical way, but something about them hit me like a fist to the gut. The ice, Rainier's ice, is ancient. Some of it predates memory. It moves slow, silent, but it remembers what walks across it, what falls into it, what dies beneath it, and what escapes because something had. This thing, the one breathing through holes, wearing faces, swallowing campers, it hadn't always been awake. Maybe it had been frozen once, buried deep in glacial stone for millennia. But the ice is melting now, every year, faster. Maybe we released something we were never supposed to meet. Or maybe it was never dead, just sleeping. I kept walking. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My hands were cracked and numb. I lost my footing crossing a shale field and split my eyebrow open on a jagged stone. Blood filled my eye, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. The mountain pulsed under my feet now, like it knew I was trying to leave. By nightfall, I stumbled into a clearing and stopped dead. My van was there, parked neatly between two ancient firs, just like I'd left it, except it couldn't be. I'd seen the impression in the dirt, I'd seen the hole, Alice had been taken. But here she was. I approached slowly. The driver's side door was unlocked. Inside, the same quilt, same boots on the floor, same old map with Cal's initials penciled in next to every summit we'd ever climbed. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. And it was quiet. Too quiet. I backed away. That's when the engine turned over. By itself. I didn't even see the figure behind the wheel until the headlights flared to life. And even then I only caught a silhouette, but it was enough. The shape of a man, same build, same hair, same damn posture I'd had for 40 years. The figure in the van turned its head, slowly, and smiled. I ran. Not toward the woods, but up. I don't know why. Instinct maybe, but I scrambled up a ridge to the west, slipping on loose stone, grabbing roots. The van engine roared behind me, but I didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached the top. And then I saw it, below me. The earth pulsed, the entire basin, breathing. The forest floor wasn't solid anymore. It was soft, swelling, sinking, like a diaphragm, dozens, maybe hundreds of holes opening and closing in rhythm. Some were no bigger than a coin, others large enough to swallow a school bus. And from every one of them, that same sound rose up, breathing, chewing, calling. I screamed. Not words, just a sound of raw disbelief, grief, rage, because I finally understood. The mountain wasn't trying to keep me. It was trying to replace me. Every voice I'd ever heard lost in the fog, every missing hiker, every ranger that vanished, they weren't taken. They were rewritten, swallowed. And now it was my turn. I stumbled backward down the ridge, half falling, grabbing brush and stone and raw air. My lungs burned, my legs buckled, but I couldn't stop. Not with that thing still sitting in my van. Not with those holes yawning open like eyes that had finally seen me. It wasn't just hunting me anymore. It was inviting me, luring me back towards something older than the trees. Something carved into the mountain's bones before we had names for fear. I knew I had one shot. I couldn't outrun it, couldn't fight it. But I'd spent years studying the geology of this place, trail briefings, topographic patterns, fault lines, subglacial cavities. If I could make it to the old fire tower above Mystic Lake, I might get a radio signal out. If not, at least I'd die above the tree line, where the ground couldn't open beneath me. I made for the high slope, north and east, moving diagonally to avoid the basin. Every 50 steps, I'd hear something shift beneath the earth, something dragging itself through sediment and stone like it remembered being fluid once, like it remembered drowning continents. At one point, I passed a tree that had been unpulled underground by its roots. Not snapped, not toppled, pulled. The trunk disappeared into a perfect hole maybe 10 feet across. The bark still damp. A faint smell of copper in the air. Blood. I didn't stop. The higher I climbed, the more the forest changed. It grew quieter, older, less alive in the way we know it. The trees were bigger, yes, but their bark was wrong, striated like muscle, smooth in places like skin, and some of the branches had what looked like eyes, or at least impressions where eyes should be. Watching me, judging me. I began to hear voices again. My daughter's laughter. Cal's whistle. My ex-wife singing off-key to her favorite Willie Nelson record. All perfect, all sharp in my ears like memories caught in a storm. And I knew what the mountain was doing. It was reaching inside me, finding the warm places, twisting them. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood just to stay grounded. By dusk, I reached the scree slope below the fire tower. The old steel frame jutted out above the treetops like the skeleton of some forgotten guardian. I didn't know if it would still stand. I didn't care. I just climbed. Rung after rung, hands scraped raw, boots slipping on iron slick with ice and time. When I reached the top, I collapsed on the wooden platform, gasping, hands trembling. The wind tore at me from the west, freezing and real. The first real thing I'd felt in days. And then I saw the sky. Not stars, not clouds. Something else, a blackness above Rainier's summit, deep and wrong. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something that drank it. A swirling void that pulsed in rhythm with the mountain's breath. I raised my eyes slowly and saw the glacier move. Not crack, not melt. Move. Like something beneath it had begun to shift. A bulge of ice rising and falling, slow and massive. A breath drawn from the planet's lungs. And then, from the void above, I saw something descend. Thin, long, segmented, like a tendril made of smoke and shadow and memory. It reached toward the mountain like it was returning to something it never should have left. And the holes below me, hundreds of them, opened wide in unison. Not mouths now, eyes, each one reflecting my face, my face, my face. Over and over in warped, distorted forms, old, young, dead, screaming, smiling, variations of me echoing back from the mouths of the earth. A mockery of identity. That's when I realized I hadn't escaped anything. The fire tower wasn't sanctuary. It was an altar, and I was the offering. The wind howled louder than before, tearing across the tower, shaking the rusted beams until they groaned like dying animals. The air had weight now, heavy and thick, as if gravity had turned against me. I could barely breathe. Below me, the mountain opened its lungs wide and exhaled. I felt it in my chest, in my bones, in the soles of my feet. The glacier below pulsed again, this time cracking, a thunderous groan that echoed like a scream too big for the world to contain. I dropped to my knees, my eardrums rang, blood trickled from my nose, but I couldn't look away, because I finally saw it. Not the whole thing, just a glimpse. A mouth the size of a cathedral yawning open beneath the ice, rings of teeth like layered shale, a maw that had never seen light and never needed to. From its center came not fire or bile, but memory. I felt it pour into me. I saw men in wool uniforms, lost to the snows in 1910, pulled into pits that sealed behind them like wounds. I saw a woman in 1978 camping alone near Ipsut Pass, whispering to the trees as she stepped calmly into the earth. I saw search parties walking in circles until they gave up. I saw 1,000 names on ranger logs that were never followed up. And I saw my own name, already written in ink that wasn't dry. Then came the voice, not from the sky, not from below. Inside me, it sounded like me. It sounded like every version of me, a chorus made from the bones of my choices, regret, grief, triumph, failure, all tangled into a single wordless command. Give in. It didn't scream, it didn't plead, it invited, and for one sickening moment I wanted to. I wanted rest, peace. I wanted to be held by something so vast it made my pain irrelevant. But then I remembered her, my daughter. And the last thing I'd said to her before I left, I just need to know the mountains still remembers me. And now I did. It remembered. Too well. But I didn't need it to. I staggered to my feet, the wind trying to knock me over. I gripped the radio mounted to the inside wall of the tower, flipped the power switch, and heard only static. I screamed into it anyway. Ranger Base, this is Thomas Yeager. If anyone can hear me, the mountain is alive. There's something in the glacier. It mimics, it digs, it replaces. Don't come up here. Don't dig. Just listen. Static. Then a click. Another voice. Cal, or something wearing his voice. We know. I dropped the radio. It shattered on the planks. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up 2 days later in a ranger station back near Longmire. They said a patrol had found me wandering along the road, barefoot, clothes torn, blood in my beard. I told them everything. They smiled politely, nodded, said I must have been hypothermic, said I was lucky to be alive. I asked if anyone had found my van. They said no vehicle had been reported, no trace at all. They said I came in alone, but here's the thing. My boots were clean, my fingernails trimmed, my hair shorter than I remembered, and in my coat pocket I found a pine cone, not one from the forest floor, one carved from stone. Perfect, symmetrical, artificial. I'm home now, or what passes for home. I haven't left the house in weeks, haven't answered the phone, haven't turned on the TV, because every time the room goes quiet, I hear it. The sound of chewing, wet, slow, patient. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I think I catch it. The flicker of another face behind mine. Not quite mimicking, just waiting. So if you ever find yourself driving east toward Mount Rainier, chasing some old trail or whisper of the past, I beg you, don't stop where the road ends. Don't follow the holes, don't listen to the wind, because the mountain remembers, and it's still hungry.